Hey guys, tonight we take a slow walk through the misty hills of medieval Germany, fog curling at your ankles, dew collecting on your sleeves, and somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of a girl's voice humming a tune that doesn't quite belong to this century. You're not entirely sure what time it is, or even what year, but that's okay. Time is soft here. And your headache? Still faintly there, like a small bell ringing inside your skull. Don't worry. There's someone waiting who might help. She's small, cloaked in linen, and very much ahead of her time. Her name is Hildegard. And tonight, you're going to follow her from headaches to herbs to harmonies. Now, granted, you probably won't survive the century. There's plague, superstition, and the occasional angry bishop. But your head might feel better before you go. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge slowly along a gravel path in the rolling Rhineland countryside, circa 1098. It's not the most luxurious of centuries, but the birds are earnest and the sky is doing that cloudy maybe rain maybe not thing that feels like a long sigh. There's something in the air, something earthy and damp and sweet, like wild thyme underfoot or crushed sage leaves between your fingertips. You spot her up ahead, a girl no more than 8 or 9, crouched near a patch of wildly overgrown greenery. She's not weeding. She's watching. Listening, maybe? Her fingers twitch near a clump of feverfew, her eyes narrowed as if the herb is whispering secrets. That's Hildegard. And you, for some reason, have been sent to help her. You're not sure why. You're not a monk, not a nun, not even particularly qualified in botany, but here you are. Her world is bounded by stone cloisters and chants that echo through long corridors. Her headache started early. Sharp flashes behind the eyes, sometimes with halos of light, sometimes with strange sounds that no one else hears. No one's entirely sure what to make of them. Are they illnesses, punishments, or maybe prophecies? You, of course, don't say any of this. You just kneel down beside her and pretend to understand plants. She glances at you sideways and mutters something about yarrow leaves and balance. You nod wisely, like you also understand the connection between headaches and flower stems. Spoiler, you don't. The headache comes on that evening. Not yours, hers. She doesn't cry. She never cries. She just grips the edge of the wooden table in the cloister refectory, her face pale, her gaze tilted upward like she's looking through the ceiling into some divine headache management hotline. You try to be helpful, offer water, suggest rest. But rest isn't the cure here. Instead, she hums. Low at first, then rising in pitch. Not a song, not quite Latin, not quite a tune. But it does something. You feel it in your teeth, oddly enough. The monks in the next room stop arguing. Even the chickens outside grow suspiciously quiet. It's the first time you realize that Hildegard doesn't just see things when she's in pain. She hears them. And sometimes she sings them back. Over the next few months, you follow her. There's not much else to do. She's a puzzle, part child, part prophet, part very small doctor with zero formal training and too much insight. Her headaches come and go like visitors, uninvited but somehow expected. And every time, they leave her a little different. She talks to plants like their co-workers. She says things like, the nettle is angry today, or the rosemary wants you to breathe more slowly. You find this weird. You also find it helpful. Because weirdly enough, when she suggests you chew on a particular bitter leaf after your own pounding skull day, it works. Not immediately. Not like magic. But enough. You learn the names, valerian, skullcap, hyssop, mugwort. Not just herbs but personalities in her little green world. Each has a mood, a season, a role. She doesn't explain much, just gives you a bunch of leaves and tells you not to mess it up. You don't mess it up. Mostly, then come the visions. Real ones. Or maybe not. Historians still argue whether Hildegard's visions were genuine spiritual messages or the dramatic results of untreated migraines paired with intense religious devotion. But they start simple, flashes of light, strange symbols, colors that don't belong in the 1100s. You're with her in the chapel when one hits. The candles flicker, though no wind stirs. Her hands tremble, her eyes widen, and she speaks, not in Latin, not in German, but in a language you don't recognize. Her head tilts back, her body stays still, and then, nothing. Afterward, she writes. Pages and pages. About the stars. About God. About the bitter root of torment and the sweet oil of peace. About headaches, even. She says they're a form of instruction, unpleasant, yes, but revealing. You're not entirely convinced. But you keep showing up. One afternoon, she points to a sprig of violet growing between two rocks and tells you to crush it gently and breathe in the scent. You do. It's light, faintly floral. Calming, that's for melancholy, she says simply. And for what the monks call brain heat. She gestures vaguely toward your forehead. You've got some. You have no idea what brain heat is, but you're strangely grateful someone noticed. More people start arriving. They hear about the girl who sees things. Some want prophecies. Others want relief. You help them into the cloister one by one, peasants with aching joints, mothers with toothaches, one nervous knight who doesn't say a word, just cradles his head and whimpers when the light changes. She helps them all. Sometimes with herbs. Sometimes with humming. Occasionally with a firm lecture about divine harmony and the sin of poor sleep. You're still not sure what to believe. But as the sun sets each evening over the hilltop and the bells chime soft and low, there's something about being near Hildegard that makes your own head feel lighter. Maybe it's the herbs. Maybe it's the music. Maybe it's just the way she looks at you. Like your pain isn't something to be feared, but understood. You fall asleep that night on a straw-stuffed mattress, the scent of dried mint hanging in the air, your own breath falling into rhythm with a distant, half-remembered chant. And, for once, your head doesn't hurt. The sun is barely up, just a pale blur behind layers of mist and the smell of damp with smoke when you're back at it, following the quiet crunch of Hildegard's footsteps along the stone path toward the garden again. The cloister is still asleep. A few birds pipe up, half-hearted and unsure. You, meanwhile, are wide awake. She's already gripping a small woven basket in one hand and mumbling something to the fennel stalks like they offended her. You've grown used to this. Hildegard talks to her garden like most people talk to their siblings, fondly but with authority. Today you're weeding. Or pretending to. She hands you a spade and nods toward a cluster of something leafy that may or may not be weeds. You dig. Slowly. Sleepily. Mostly so you don't poke yourself with something sacred and bitter. She's focused. In that meditative, monkish way that looks peaceful from the outside and slightly terrifying up close. You'd think someone who gets regular vision migraines and hears celestial music would be more dramatic. But no. Hildegard is practical. Almost aggressively so. This root balances bile, she murmurs, snapping a stalk with a satisfying crunch and placing it in her basket. Too much bile and the body becomes wet and cold. Coldness brings fog to the mind. Fog brings pain. You blink. You feel personally attacked and also mildly damp. But you nod. As if you understood a single word. This is your first real lesson in Hildegard's healing system, her philosophy that illness, especially pain, comes from imbalance. Not sin. Not demons. Just imbalance. Heat, cold, dryness, wetness. Opposing humors knocking your inner harmony out of tune. You apparently are too cold and slow today. Which fair? She hands you a leaf and tells you to chew it. You chew. It tastes like pepper and regret. That's lovage, she says, watching your grimace with delight. It gets the blood moving. You don't feel your blood moving, but your tongue is now wide awake. The garden is small but dense. Not an English-style herb garden with polite rows and decorative signage. No, this is a living pharmacy. Nettles jostle beside elderflower. Wormwood looms like a cranky ant. Everything smells alive, sharp and sweet and earthy all at once. You crouch beside the mint patch, which Hildegard insists is good for clearing the head of venomous vapors. That sounds overdramatic until she reminds you that medieval monks believed bad air could cause brain rot. You stare at the mint with renewed respect. She adds handfuls of sage, yarrow, and comfort to her basket. Each one comes with a sleepy explanation. Sage for wisdom and memory, yarrow for wounds of the body and the spirit, comfort to knit things, flesh, bone, maybe even nerves. She says it like she's talking about stitching a ripped sock. Some of it sounds like science. Some of it sounds like poetry. Most of it sounds like someone who knows what she's doing. You end up spending most of your day with dirt under your fingernails and your knees stiff from crouching. But your headache, the one that's been creeping in since sunrise, doesn't fully bloom. It hovers, and then fades, slowly, like steam lifting off wet grass. That night, Hildegard sits by the hearth and begins to write. Not letters, not sermons, recipes, herbal remedies, each one laid out in her precise Latin script. You lean over her shoulder and recognize a few of the ingredients. Rue, valerian, linden flower. She writes like a woman on a mission. You ask her who she's writing for. She doesn't answer right away. Then, without looking up, she says, anyone who hurts. That includes you, apparently. As the weeks go on, your education continues. She starts letting you mix things, teas, ointments, strange bubbling concoctions that smell like mossy soup and old stone. You learn to grind dried herbs with a pestle that's older than you, to boil mixtures just until the steam curls but doesn't scream. You learn to recognize the scent of boiled horehound, terrible, and when to add honey, always. Hildegard lets you label the jars. That's a big deal. Your handwriting is questionable, but she trusts you not to confuse feverfew with foxglove, which could, as she puts it, end in more visions than you bargained for. One afternoon, she brings out a battered old cloth and lays it flat. It's a kind of map, not of the garden but of the body as she sees it. Lines showing channels of heat, rivers of breath, zones of pain and light. It's beautiful, also completely baffling. She places a dried marigold petal on the temple section and taps it. For this, she says, you must listen. You don't know what she means until you realize she's humming again. Low, circular tones that feel like warm air. She places a hand near your brow and keeps humming. You close your eyes. Something inside you shifts, not dramatically, just slightly. Like a window opened in another room. The headache you didn't know you were getting starts to evaporate. You don't ask questions anymore. Now the sisters come to her. The other women in the abbey, usually stoic and reserved, start slipping into the garden when no one's looking. They pretend to examine the lavender, but you know they're here for her. One nun suffers from what she calls invisible pressure behind the eyes. Hildegard gives her an infusion of betterny and a salve made with rosemary and beeswax. Another reports clocks ticking that aren't there. She gets lemon balm and 3 days of humming meditations. You help prepare everything. You keep notes. You even start noticing patterns. The woman who gets dizzy near the full moon always feels better with peppermint steam and oat broth. The novice who cries in her sleep perks up with anise seed and sweet apple cider. It starts to feel like magic. But Hildegard insists it isn't. It's listening, she says, to the body, to the plants, to God. Mostly in that order. Of course, not everyone approves. Some of the older monks raise eyebrows. Herbal cures are fine in theory. But the singing? The charts? The celestial metaphors? You hear whispers. That Hildegard is too proud. That her knowledge came from dreams, not books. That women should not speak so confidently about pain. You ask her if she's worried. She shrugs. Headaches don't care what monks think. Fair point. She goes back to grinding herbs. You go back to labeling. The garden changes with the seasons. Spring brings bursts of lemon balm and young nettles. Summer gives you basil and marigold. Fall is for root harvest, burdock, angelica, slow-stirred potions simmered at dusk. Each plant has its time. Each pain its season. You start to believe that healing isn't just about the cure. It's about the rhythm, the ritual, the slow, deliberate noticing of things. Pain shows up like a guest. Uninvited, sometimes loud, but not always cruel. Hildegard teaches you how to greet it. Offer tea. Maybe a song. And if it won't leave, at least you're not alone with it anymore. The last thing you do tonight is help her prepare a headache balm. You mash violets and mint with thick beeswax, heat it until it glows gold, and pour it into a tiny carved jar. She hands it to you with a soft smile. For tomorrow, she says. Just in case the moon disagrees with you. You nod. And for the first time in a long while, you fall asleep not worried about what your head will feel like in the morning. Because now at least, you know who to ask. It's dark in the chapel tonight. Not the kind of dark that frightens you, but the kind that wraps itself around your shoulders like a cloak. A soft one. The stone walls breathe cool air. Candles flicker along the edges, casting long shadows across the floor as if light itself is unsure whether to speak above a whisper. You're sitting cross-legged near the apse, listening to Hildegard hum again. This is no lullaby. It's not even really a melody. It's something else. A sound that loops in on itself, not in circles but in soft spirals. Her voice floats just above silence, dipping here and there like a bird coasting on wind. You can feel it, not just hear it, deep in your chest. Like the bones inside you are listening. She doesn't look at you. She's got her eyes closed, hands folded gently in her lap. But somehow you know this, whatever it is, isn't just for her. It's for you too. You had a headache this morning. A real scorcher. Started right behind the left eye and bloomed slowly like a cruel little daisy. You didn't say anything. You were going to just live with it. But she noticed. Of course she did. She always notices. Don't fight it, she said quietly. Sing to it. You tried humming in the garden later that afternoon, alone among the thyme and tansy. It didn't work. At first. But then something strange happened. You relaxed your shoulders. Closed your eyes. Hummed low. One note. Then another. The tension shifted. It didn't vanish, but it moved. Drifted. like fog lifting from your mind, and now here you are, listening to the woman who taught you how to soothe pain with nothing more than a tone and a breath. Back in the daylight hours, people are starting to talk. Not just the nuns. Not just you. Word has spread. The abbess with the voice. The herbalist with holy visions. The one who sings people's pain away. They come from nearby villages now. Some with aching joints. Others with stomach troubles. But more and more, it's the ones like you. The ones with head noise. With demon wind in the brain. With skull thunder that no poultice or priest has ever cured. They arrive tired. Pale. Eyes squinting against the sun. And they leave with jars of balm and quiet smiles and sometimes songs in their pocket. Of course, not everyone believes in the music. Too much chanting, one man mutters as he limps away with a jar of mint salve and a headache that probably started in 1065. Makes the pain echo. You resist the urge to hum at him just out of spite. Today, you and Hildegard are gathering hyssop. It grows a little wild by the outer wall. Purple flowers on spiky stems that bees absolutely adore. She explains how it clears the lungs and lifts the weight that drags thoughts downward. You raise an eyebrow at the phrasing. She shrugs. Music lifts too, she says. So do certain flowers. They just do it differently. You believe her. You're not sure when that shift happened, from skepticism to quiet trust, but it did. Somewhere between the marigold compresses and the violet-infused oil, you stopped needing proof. Now you just listen. That evening, she introduces you to a new kind of chant. Not a hymn. Not even a prayer. It's elemental. Notes that mimic the wind. Echoes of running water. Little rises and falls that remind you of breathing. Of tides. It's not music for the soul, she says. It's for the nerves. You laugh. A little. But then she shows you how the melody loops into itself. A soft dissonance resolving slowly, gently. You hum along, tentatively at first. Then fuller. Deeper. And you feel it. The headache you've been carrying all week loosens its grip. Your temples unclench. Your jaw, tight from chewing on nothing, relaxes. It doesn't feel like magic. It feels like permission. One of the sisters, a small woman with trembling hands and the voice of a nightingale, admits to chronic migraines. She's tried everything: vinegar-soaked cloths, fasting, prayer, even blessed river stones tied around her neck. None of it worked, until Hildegard sat beside her one afternoon and sang a tone so low and steady. The birds stopped chirping. Then, gently, almost absent-mindedly, she massaged the sister's temples with balm made of wild rose and melted lard. Close your eyes, she said. You don't need to understand it. Just let it. The sister fell asleep in the garden. For 2 hours. Woke up without pain for the first time in months. She cried. You did too. Silently, of course. Later, Hildegard explains that pain isn't just a sensation. It's a conversation. A dialogue between body and spirit. And sometimes what pain wants most is to be heard. That's what the music is for. Not to drown the pain out, but to answer it. You feel your eyes sting at that one. You pretend it's just the onions you were chopping earlier. Historians still argue whether Hildegard was the first person to use music therapeutically or if she just popularized something that had long existed in oral tradition. Some say her chants were revolutionary. Others say they were eccentric flourishes, medieval wellness trends with no real science behind them. You decide it doesn't matter, because you were there in the chapel when a chant ended with the quietest note. One so gentle you couldn't tell where the sound stopped and the silence began. And in that pause, you felt your own head stop hurting. Not forever, but long enough. The cloister garden becomes more than just a pharmacy. It becomes a soundstage, a sanctuary. Sisters walk among the lavender, humming quietly to themselves. One nun takes to singing her morning prayers while rubbing balm on her temples. Another begins journaling her symptoms next to sketches of musical notes. You overhear someone whisper, "The abbess tunes headaches like a harp." It's meant as a joke, but also kind of accurate. Of course, not all days are harmonious. Sometimes the headaches come back harder. For Hildegard, for others, you have nights when even the deepest chants don't quiet the pounding. That's when she reminds you music is medicine. But like any medicine, it needs rest between doses. So you rest, sit quietly by the fire. No singing, just breath. Maybe peppermint tea. Maybe nothing at all, because silence, too, can be part of the cure. You're helping her label scrolls one day, tucked in the scriptorium where the windows let in the gentlest light. When she pauses, midword, she stares into space, fingers still on the quill. "Do you hear that?" she whispers. You stop moving. Then you do. A low tone, barely audible, like wind humming through hollow stone. Or maybe not real at all. "It's a headache," she says softly. "Far off. But coming. You raise an eyebrow. She sighs and returns to her writing. Well, we'll sing to it when it gets here. You learn to welcome the melodies like weather. To ride the tones even when your own head aches. You're not cured. Not forever. But you've learned tools. Learned sounds that soothe. Learned a rhythm that makes pain less frightening. And that is something. That's everything. There's thunder rolling over the hills tonight, not the dramatic, lightning-splitting tree kind, just a slow, muttering rumble like the sky forgot what it was mad about halfway through the sentence. Rain taps against the stained glass windows of the cloister like a bored musician. Inside, it smells like damp stone, hot wax, and rosemary hanging to dry. You're curled up near the hearth with a steaming mug of something brown and questionably bitter. Hildegard calls it clarity broth. You call it leaf soup. It's growing on you. Slightly. Across from you, she's sharpening a quill with steady precision. Surrounded by parchment, dried calendula petals, and an increasingly territorial cat named Viriditas who seems to think he owns the scriptorium. Today was a headache day. For both of you. Yours started with the weather, your skull responding to the pressure like a badly tuned drum. Hildegard's came on slower but deeper. She called it a storm in the temple, her usual shorthand for a pain that made her go silent for nearly an hour. You didn't try to fix it. You just sat there, humming softly, letting her rest. That's the thing you've learned. Sometimes healing doesn't mean doing. Sometimes it means not doing. Not pushing. Just being there. Breathing through it. By now, you've seen the full arc of her process. It always starts the same, with stillness. A kind of noticing. Hildegard sits in silence, eyes closed, head tilted slightly to the side like she's listening to a voice from very far away. Then the herbs. She'll call for yarrow, if it's a tight, stabbing pain, or violet, if it's foggier, sadder, more like a shadow than a spike. She'll sometimes choose lemon balm for restless skull energy, or fennel when she senses heat in the back of the thoughts. Sometimes she applies balm. Sometimes she sings, and sometimes she just waits. You can't always chase it out, she once said. Sometimes pain needs to feel seen before it can leave. You thought that was nonsense, until your next headache vanished after you simply acknowledged it out loud and took a nap. Historians still argue whether Hildegard's descriptions of the subtle energies of herbs were metaphor, mysticism, or a wildly early form of psychosomatic therapy. Some say she was centuries ahead of her time. Others say she simply gave structure to suffering and let people feel less alone in it. You say she gave you language, and that's no small thing. The manuscript she's working on today is unlike anything you've seen from her. It's not strictly herbal, not strictly musical. It's a blend. A woven tapestry of chant formulas, headache case studies, dream fragments, and diagrams of what she calls energetic tensions in the head. She's even sketched out zones on a figure of the human skull, tiny Latin scribbles pointing to places she calls lucida nodis and the gate of breath. You're not sure if they map to anything modern, but they make sense to you in a way that diagrams rarely do. You look at one, a shaded crescent around the right eye labeled lumen questionis, the light of questioning. You tap it gently. This one, she nods without looking up. That's the place headaches go when you're thinking too hard about whether or not you exist. Fair. You sip your leaf soup and stare into the fire. Hildegard tells you that every plant has a kind of song inside it. Not a melody, exactly. More like a frequency. A resonance. The trick isn't to hear it, but to match it. You don't heal with the herb, she says. You harmonize with it. You once watched her hold a sprig of thyme between her fingers and hum a pitch until the air around her felt warmer. Not because the plant was doing anything, but because she was. You tried it with chamomile once. Gotta be instead. Still learning. People keep coming. More of them. Some bring gifts, loaves of honey bread, wool cloaks, mysterious cheeses in questionable condition. Others bring stories of headaches that come with voices, of sharp pains that arrive only during church bells, of a girl who stopped speaking after hearing a single dissonant chant. They sit with Hildegard. Sometimes for hours. She doesn't always offer solutions. She just listens, reflects, gathers herbs, hums. And slowly, you notice, many of them walk out straighter than they walked in. One woman, a midwife from Mainz, tells you that she hasn't slept through the night in 15 years because of a chisel behind the eye. You give her Hildegard's balm of rosemary, mugwort, and bear fat. Then, without thinking, you suggest a 3-note hum she taught you yesterday. The woman tries it. 3 long exhales in tone. She cries afterward. Says the pain didn't leave, but it moved. You start to believe that's often enough. There's one afternoon, one quiet, golden afternoon, when the sky is clear and the garden smells like hope, where Hildegard hands you something unexpected, a scrap of parchment with your name on it. Or at least, her nickname for you. Acolitus capitis head's apprentice. You grin. She shrugs like it's nothing, but it's not nothing. She's seen your headaches, your bad days, your silence. And now she trusts you enough to carry this work forward. You're officially on the team. Tonight, you help her blend a new oil for tension knots that hold the mind hostage. It includes marjoram, rose petals, and melted duck fat. Smells odd. Feels glorious. You both sit by the fire afterward, listening to the rain. She starts humming. You join in. The two tones melt into one another like colors blending in a cloudy sky. And for the first time in days, your head feels completely, absolutely still. Not empty, just at peace. The mornings have taken on a rhythm now, just slow enough to be soothing, just structured enough to keep you from floating off into complete medieval dream space. You wake before the bells, stretch under a wool blanket that still smells faintly of thyme and fire smoke, and wander the cloister before sunrise with your headaches still deciding whether or not to show up. You've come to think of your head not as an enemy, but as a sometimes unreliable roommate. Occasionally loud, often moody, and prone to complaining when it rains. Hildegard, of course, would say pain is a messenger, not a nuisance. It speaks, she once told you. When the rest of you forgets to listen, you hated that the first time she said it. You love it now. Today, she sends you out into the forest, not far, just past the orchard and into the thick tangle of pine and alder where the sun filters through in sleepy beams. You're foraging for wormwood. You are, to be clear, still not good at foraging. You mistake thistles for feverfew. You pick too much tansy. You trip over a tree root and apologize out loud to a log. But eventually, you find it. Wormwood. Silvery, sharp-scented, and perpetually suspicious-looking. Hildegard says it's a sacred herb, powerful, bitter, and slightly terrifying. Like truth, she adds. Good in small doses. You pluck the leaves carefully, listening to the soft hush of the wind threading through branches above. The forest is quiet today. Not silent, just hushed like it's watching you work and choosing not to interrupt. When you get back, she's already boiling something thick and green in a pot that's seen more healing than most doctors. Wormwood, you announce triumphantly, holding up your humble bouquet. She barely glances up. If it's thistle again, I swear on my skull. You hand it over. She nods. Acceptable. You beam. That evening, she explains wormwood's properties, good for digestion, for female ailments, for melancholy rooted in the stomach, and oddly enough, for certain types of headaches that start low and work their way upward. You're not entirely sure what that means, but your lower back has been grumbling and your temples feel heavy, so you try a sip of her newest tea blend. It tastes like a sock full of crushed coins. You smile bravely and lie that it's delightful. She does not believe you. Later, you help her compose a new chant. It's a gentle one, built around intervals of perfect fourths and a droning bass that makes your ribs hum. She doesn't write it down. Just hums, then sings, then lets you repeat it until the sound settles in your spine. It's meant for those who suffer from clouded mind, a term she uses for the kind of headache that arrives with sorrow. Grief headaches, you guess? Or the ache behind the eyes after you've cried too long for someone who isn't coming back. She says music can hold pain when words can't, and sometimes you find that's the only thing that helps. One woman arrives late in the evening, soaked from the road, her eyes sunken deep into her face. She doesn't speak at first, just sits, pale, trembling. You recognize it. That flat, buzzing fog. It lives between the ears. Not pain exactly, just pressure. Oh wait, Hildegard nods at you. You step forward, awkward at first, then kneel and offer your hands. The woman takes them. You hum the chant. The new one. The one made for clouds. The woman blinks, then exhales. Her shoulders drop a fraction. It's not a miracle. It's just the smallest kind of opening. Hildegard calls these the hard headaches. Not the stabbing kind. Not the fire in the skull kind. The kind that lives under your skin and never announces itself clearly. The ones you carry for years without knowing it. You've had them. Maybe you still do. She once told you they respond best to bitters and breath. So now you keep dried wormwood in your satchel. You carry a chant in your pocket like a talisman. You breathe slower. Sometimes that's enough. Historians still argue whether Hildegard's classifications of pain and temperament had real medical merit or were symbolic expressions of spiritual struggle. Some see her as a proto-psychologist. Others dismiss her as poetic but scientifically fuzzy. You personally have stopped needing permission to believe her, because belief here isn't about doctrine. It's about noticing. And lately, you've noticed that your headaches are showing up differently. Softer, less sharp. Or maybe they haven't changed at all. Maybe you have. Maybe you've simply gotten better at listening. The garden is quieter now as autumn leans in. The plants are fading. The air is thicker. But you still find moments, like this morning when a single late bloom of yarrow greeted you at the edge of the path like a tiny hello. You picked it and tucked it behind your ear. Hildegard laughed and said you looked like a headache priest. You're fine with that. There's a new blend she teaches you. It's for headaches born from tension in the chest. You wrinkle your nose. That's not how anatomy works, you argue. She ignores you, mixes rose petals, bay, and a bit of clove into a sachet. She says to heat it gently and place it over your heart when the pounding starts in your temples. You try it. Shouldn't work. It does, because apparently some headaches begin where your secrets live. You're sitting by the fire when she finally confesses quietly that her own visions have become less frequent. She still feels them like pressure behind her eyes, but they don't bloom like they used to. She shrugs. Maybe I've said what I needed to say. You ask if that means her headaches are gone. She smiles, tired and wry. They visit, but they don't stay. You nod. You get it, because healing isn't always about elimination. Sometimes it's about reintroducing yourself to the thing that hurt you, learning its name, and asking it what it wants. You end the day like always preparing balm, humming under your breath, jotting a note in the margins of one of her scrolls. The ink smudges slightly. You don't mind. You breathe in the scent of dried hyssop and hot wax. Somewhere nearby, a bell chimes soft and slow. Your head doesn't hurt tonight, and even if it did, you know what to do. There's a chill in the cloister this morning, the kind that creeps into your bones before you realize it's not just cold, it's damp. Not weather damp, but stone damp. The type that seeps up through the floor and gently reminds you that no matter how holy the space, mold still wins eventually. You tug your wool shawl tighter around your shoulders and trudge into the refectory where Hildegard is already sipping something hot and pungent that smells like regret and roasted fennel. She pushes a cup toward you without looking up from her notes. You raise an eyebrow. What's this? Head armor, she replies. You stare into the liquid. It appears to be moving slightly. You sip anyway. It's awful. But halfway through, your head clears a little. Figures. Today is one of her busier days. A traveling merchant has arrived with two sons, one silent, the other complaining of a demon in the crown of the skull. They're loud, skeptical, and dripping with rain. Hildegard listens to the older boy ramble about his skull demon with calm nods, then prescribes a head wrap soaked in vinegar and mint. For the silent one, she gently hums a note and waits. After several minutes, he whispers, "My thoughts feel like thunder." She nods. No surprise. It's because you've never let them rain. You pause, halfway through chopping dried rue leaves. She's doing it again, saying things that sound like riddles but turn out to be maps. You spend the morning helping prepare what she calls the headache bundle. It's not complicated. Lavender, dried rose, a touch of valerian, all wrapped in soft cloth and warmed near the hearth. But it's more than that. She teaches you how to present it. You don't just give the herb, she says. You give stillness with it. You give presence. You don't argue. You've seen what happens when people accept these bundles with trembling hands and guarded hope. They breathe differently. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they just sit for a long time in silence. And sometimes that's all they need. One of the nuns, Sister Margarita, is having a bad season. Her headaches have grown worse, sharper. She complains of bright edges in her vision and describes lights that flicker even when her eyes are closed. You and Hildegard sit with her near the garden gate as the last light fades from the sky. Have you seen angels? Sister Margarita asks. Hildegard looks at her for a long time, then says, I've seen pain wear wings, yes. It's not comforting exactly, but it's honest. You hand Margarita a small jar of balm made from elderflower and bear fat. She nods, eyes damp. You both treat pain like a guest, not an intruder. You hadn't realized that's what you were doing, but you liked the sound of it. Later that night, you sit with Hildegard by the fire. She's humming an unfamiliar chant, softer than usual, with fewer notes and more space between them. You ask her what it's for. It's for people who don't know how to ask for help, she says. You go quiet, because of course it is. You've been one of those people more often than you'd like to admit. She shows you a new way of mapping headaches, based not on location but on source. Not forehead or temples or base of the skull, but grief, worry, shame, exhaustion. She draws spirals on the page. Not neat circles, these are irregular, curling like ivy. She says the head is not a box to be emptied. It's a garden to be tended. Sometimes weeds grow. That's not failure. It's just weather. You copy her notes more carefully than usual. They feel like prayers. Historians still debate whether Hildegard's work was medical, mystical, or metaphorical. Whether her descriptions of pain and remedy were physical realities or spiritual allegories. Whether she healed headaches or simply gave people permission to feel them without shame. You've stopped caring, because whatever she was doing worked. You see it every day, in the tired eyes that grow soft after a chant, in the quiet smiles of someone who slept through the night for the first time in weeks, in the way your own pain doesn't feel like a curse anymore, just a message you've learned to translate. Today, a noblewoman arrives. She wears velvet and judgment. Says she's heard of the woman who sings at pain. Says she wants results, not riddles. You brace yourself. Hildegard simply hands her a warm compress of rue and clove and asks her to lie down. Then she hums. A single note, long, low. The noblewoman frowns, then blinks, then unexpectedly sighs. You watch the weight slide off her shoulders slowly like water evaporating from stone. She leaves without speaking, but she leaves lighter. You ask Hildegard why she never argues. Why she never defends herself when people call her methods strange or unholy or unladylike. She shrugs. Pain doesn't care about politics. You think that should be stitched on a flag. There's a storm coming tonight. You feel it in your skull before it hits. A dull pulse behind your eyes. A tightness in your jaw. You close your eyes and breathe. You don't panic. You warm a cloth with rosemary oil. You hum. You wait. The storm rolls in. But it doesn't break you. And that tonight is enough. You fall asleep by the fire again. Veritas the cat claims your lap. Your dreams are quiet. The mornings are darker now. Not just from the season, but from the way fog curls against the stone and refuses to move until midday. It hugs the cloister like a second wall, muffling the world into a hush that makes your own thoughts feel loud by comparison. Even the bells sound different. Muffled, soft-edged, as if the air has turned to wool. You stand near the herb-drying rack, brushing frost from the edge of a clay pot. Hildegard is behind you, holding a bundle of dried lavender upside down and smacking it firmly into a wide bowl. She's not angry, this is just how she harvests seeds. Decisively. Like the lavender owes her money. You're in the middle of restocking the bomb shelf, mint and valerian for tension, feverfew for pulsing aches, and the odd blend of mustard seed and honey she insists helps with headaches of moral confusion. You're not sure that's a medical category, but you've come to trust her naming system. This is your rhythm now. Plants, songs, warmth, and the occasional migraine from eating too many candied violets in one sitting, which she warned you about, by the way. Today brings something new, a messenger from a nearby abbey. He's young, wide-eyed, and clearly terrified of being inside a building full of nuns. He delivers a letter sealed in green wax and refuses to make eye contact with anyone taller than a beehive. The letter is from another abbess. She's requesting Hildegard's assistance, not for healing a body, but for discerning the source of a communal affliction. According to the letter, nearly half the convent suffers from piercing pain behind the eyes and disorientation during prayer. You raise an eyebrow. Hildegard smiles faintly. Headaches of divine confusion, she murmurs. You blink. That's a thing. Oh, absolutely. She begins packing a satchel. You know what that means. You're going on a field trip. Traveling isn't glamorous. You bounce along in a wooden cart between sacks of onions and barrels of suspiciously fizzy cider. The wind is sharp and smells like moss. Your knees ache. Hildegard, of course, sits ramrod straight and looks completely unbothered. She hums under her breath and jots notes on a wax tablet with her free hand. At some point, you fall asleep on a barrel of pickled cabbage and dream about singing plants. You arrive at the other convent by dusk. It's smaller, colder, and smells like fear and burnt sage. The abbess greets Hildegard with the barely concealed desperation of someone who's tried everything short of exorcism. The afflicted nuns look hollow-eyed and nervous. Some flinch when the bells toll. Others cover their ears when you speak above a whisper. A few seem lost inside themselves, blinking slowly like owls in daylight. You recognize the look. You've seen it in the mirror. Hildegard doesn't begin with cures. She begins with listening. To the women. To the walls. To the silence between words. She walks the halls barefoot, pausing at doorways, humming softly to herself. After a while, she nods. The building holds echoes. You want to ask what that means, but decide to wait. She's in vision mode, eyes slightly unfocused, like she's reading a second layer of the room that no one else can see. That night, she sings a tone so low, you feel it in your ribs. One of the sisters cries, not because she's in pain, because, for a moment, she isn't. In the morning, you help Hildegard mix a wash of valerian root, thyme, and cool dash. You dip cloths into it and place them gently across the foreheads of the worst-suffering nuns. You sing with her, not words, just sounds. Simple, repeating tones that loop like slow-turning water wheels. One by one, their breathing slows. The tension drains from their jaws. One sister whispers, It's like the pain was waiting to be answered. You squeeze her hand. You know exactly what she means. Historians still argue whether Hildegard's chants had measurable physical effects or if they simply offered meditative calm. Some compare her to a proto-music therapist. Others accuse her of spiritualizing symptoms best treated with leeches and bed rest. But you're watching these women, exhausted, disoriented, unable to explain their suffering, find relief. Whether through balm or song or simply being seen, they soften. And you decide that's more important than anyone's footnotes. That night, you and Hildegard sleep in the convent's guest chamber, a spare stone cell with thin blankets and a mouse that appears to be deeply offended by your presence. You both lie in silence for a long time, listening to the wind rattle against the shutters. Do you think all headaches speak? You whisper. She's quiet for a moment. Then, no. Some we speak into. With fear. Or memory. Or silence too long held. You don't know what to say, so you don't. In the morning, she blesses the convent with a new chant. This one built from minor intervals and an unexpected descending tone near the end. She says it's for sorrow that lives in the head. They repeat it after her. You've never heard anything more beautiful. When you return to your home cloister, the garden looks smaller, but sweeter. The air is sharp with peppermint and pine. Viriditas greets you by knocking a jar off a shelf and then pretending it wasn't him. You unpack your satchel and find that Hildegard has slipped a new parchment inside. It's a diagram of a human head, but instead of veins and muscles, it's filled with words. Grief, thought, memory, light, fear, clarity. You don't ask her where she got it. You just hang it above your bed and sleep deeply for the first time in weeks. The wind is up again. It howls through the cloister windows like a choir of mildly offended ghosts. Doors creak on their hinges. Candles gutter. The cat vanishes for the day, claiming he has business elsewhere, probably involving scaring mice and judging everyone silently. You've taken to wearing 2 cloaks now, one practical and one entirely for drama, and you wrap them around yourself as you carry a bundle of dried angelica root down the hall to Hildegard's study. She's hunched over a manuscript, surrounded by scrolls and bowls of what looks like crushed pine resin. Headache? You ask. She nods. Doesn't look up. The kind that waits behind the eyes until you forget it's there. Then pounces. You wince in solidarity. You know that kind. You make tea while she mutters at a stubborn inkblot. Today's brew, lemon balm, crushed fennel, and a hint of dried sage. You drop in a single clove for courage and a slice of apple because life is short and this weather is long. As you sip, she gestures to the scroll beside her. It's a letter from a bishop, one who has heard of her work and wants clarification about her therapeutic theology. You read between the lines. He's skeptical and possibly jealous. He says pain is punishment, she says dryly, and healing is for heaven. You nearly choke on your tea. And what do you say? You ask, already knowing the answer. I say the divine gave us basil, and I plan to use it. That afternoon, you help her prepare a new tincture. This one's for rattling skulls, headaches that come after prolonged stress. She mixes equal parts lemon balm and betterny, with just a whisper of motherwort. You ask what motherwort does. Reminds the brain that it is loved, she says. Of course it does. You stir carefully. The scent rises warm and sweet. Like rest in a cup, you both drink some. The silence between you feels intentional, not empty. Like a song resting between verses. A young novice arrives just before evening prayers, clutching her head and sobbing quietly. She's ashamed. Says the pain is punishment for failing at her memorization. You kneel beside her and say the thing Hildegard once said to you. Pain isn't proof of guilt. It's a knock on the door. The novice blinks. You help her to the bench. Hildegard gently presses a warmed cloth soaked in poppy milk and rosemary over the girl's forehead. Then begins to hum. You join her. The girl falls asleep before the chant ends. You sit with her a while, watching her breathe. Hildegard explains later that many people carry pain that doesn't belong to them. Inherited burdens. Echoes from old wounds. Shame passed down like bad jewelry. She says the head remembers everything the heart refuses to hold. That sounds both beautiful and horrifying. She agrees. Historians still question whether Hildegard's treatments, herbs, chants, oils, and all, had physiological effects or merely induced relaxation. Some call her a master of the placebo. Others suspect her visions were neurological symptoms misinterpreted as divine insight. You think about that sometimes, but then you remember how many people have left her presence smiling or at least breathing a little deeper. And you decide again that definitions don't matter nearly as much as outcomes. You spend the next few days recording what she calls her headache typologies. There are many now. The iron crown pressure headaches from prolonged tension. The rain mirror those triggered by storms or barometric shifts. The flame spiral migraines with visual auras. The echoing bell headaches caused by sound, often emotion-driven. The hollow silence, a soft ache tied to grief or suppressed memory. Each one has its own treatments, balms, songs, rest, breath, prayer, plants. Each one is treated not as a problem to be crushed, but as a visitor to be understood. You realize, not for the first time, that Hildegard doesn't cure pain. She translates it. One cold evening, she hands you a jar and says, "Try this for your temple tightness." You do. It's cool, tingling with a faint scent of spruce and juniper. You sit in silence and let it work. The pain doesn't vanish, it just steps back, like a guest realizing they've overstayed. You breathe in, you breathe out, you feel lighter. That night, the stars appear for the first time in weeks. You go to the courtyard and lie on your back, watching them blink through the cold air. Hildegard joins you, wrapped in 5 shawls and holding 2 cups of something herbal and suspicious. "I sometimes wonder if stars get headaches," you say. She chuckles. "If they do, they probably hum about it." She tells you a story that in one of her visions she saw people walking through the world with glowing cords of pain trailing behind them, some tangled, some neat. The ones who were most at peace didn't have fewer cords, they just held them gently. You lie there in the silence, staring up, thinking of your own cords, and how maybe you're finally learning to hold them a little softer. The frost finally bites through the stones. Even your bones feel slower this morning, as if they've been soaking overnight in cold broth. You wrap your cloak tighter, light a candle with fingers that don't quite bend all the way yet, and trudge down the hall in search of warmth, tea, and perhaps, if the universe is generous, a headache-free day. Spoiler, the universe is not generous today. You wake up with what Hildegard calls a temporal sledgehammer, a sharp, rhythmic knock behind your eyes that pulses in time with your heartbeat, as if your skull is hosting its own morbid drum circle. Hildegard takes one look at you, nods, and sets down a bundle of sage and linden. "No singing this morning," she says gently. "Just oil and rest." You don't argue. She rubs a warm balm across your temples. It smells of basil and crushed coriander, with a faint thread of lemon peeking through like early sunlight. "You're thinking too loudly," she murmurs, pressing her thumbs just above your ears. "Let the thoughts trickle instead of roar." You exhale slowly. Your jaw unclenches. Your ribs stretch. The pain doesn't vanish, but it stops shouting. Today is for the kind of headache you can't explain to others. The one that doesn't hurt like a stab or a hammer or even a coil of pressure. It hurts like noise, like thoughts that can't find the door, like sitting in a room with a buzzing lamp you can't turn off. Hildegard calls these the spirit clutter headaches, and she has a remedy. You're not sure what's in it. You just know it involves chamomile, catmint, and exactly 3 drops of beeswax infused with the smoke of a burn psalm. She brews it into a drink so gentle you barely taste it. You sip slowly, wrapped in a wool shawl, listening to the rhythm of her footsteps as she moves around the scriptorium. You don't speak for hours, and that's exactly what your head needed. By midday, you're upright again, barely. She hands you a list of chants she's composing for winter ailments. One is for frostbite, another for frozen thought, which you're pretty sure is her poetic way of saying seasonal depression. You suggest calling it brain frost. She rolls her eyes, but writes it down anyway. Together, you copy lines from her most recent vision journal. There's one that strikes you. "Pain is a bell. Some ring hollow, some ring true. But all must be answered." You write that one twice. Just for you. A farmer arrives in the afternoon, clutching his cap and muttering about sky spikes, his word for the headaches that come before storms. You give him a pillow filled with valerian and mint, instruct him to lie on the floor with his knees bent and eyes closed. He scoffs. Then he tries it. 10 minutes later, he's snoring. Historians still argue whether Hildegard's blend of botanical treatment and spiritual metaphor was science, art, or divine PR. Some say she used religion to disguise medicine. Others argue she used medicine to sneak in mysticism, but you've come to believe she simply refused to separate them. To her, the body was not a house divided. It was a cathedral, and pain rang the bells. This evening, she teaches you a new ritual. Not a big one. Not dramatic. Just a quiet tracing of the forehead with a sprig of dried sage dipped in rosemary oil. She says it's for grounding, for clearing the noise before sleep. You ask if it works. She says nothing. Just presses the sage to your brow, draws a circle, and hums a single tone low in her chest. You don't remember falling asleep. You just remember waking with your breath deeper and your headache gone. The following days are quieter. Not because there's less to do, people still come, still bring their ailments, still cry and wince and beg for relief, but because winter slows the world. Even the headaches arrive slower, heavier, like they too must trudge through the snow. You begin experimenting with your own blends. One for should have slept headaches. One for forgot to breathe headaches. One for spent too much time around loud people headaches. Which is basically everyone this week. Hildegard tries each with a critical nose and a faint smile. You catch her keeping your basil fog bomb on her desk. You don't mention it, but your heart warms a little. One morning, you discover a box at your door. Inside, dried mint, a small wooden pestle, and a parchment note. Says simply, you are no longer an apprentice of pain. You are a translator of silence. You clutch it to your chest, then get back to work, because there are tinctures to make, chants to hum, and heads that ache waiting gently to be heard. You wake to snow, not the kind that drifts daintily from the sky like a lace veil over the world. This is the heavy kind, thick and wet and pressing against the windows like it wants to come inside and borrow your socks. The cloister is muffled. Footsteps vanish into softness. The world has been turned down to a whisper. You love it, until your skull starts pulsing like a warning drum. Snow headaches, Hildegard calls them. They come not from cold but from pressure, air turning inward, like a held breath that never exhales. You feel it behind your eyes, a tightness like a fist wrapped in fog. Congratulations, Hildegard mutters as she lights a fire. Your brain's responding to atmospheric mood swings. Again, she doesn't say it unkindly. You don't take it unkindly. You've learned that sarcasm is one of her preferred medical tools. You help her prepare warm compresses soaked in winter balm, clove, cinnamon, chamomile, and an odd little resin called storax. It smells like sleep and spice and something faintly forbidden. She calls it a mood salve. You press it to your forehead. It doesn't cure the pain, but it makes it feel less personal. A visitor arrives just before midday. His beard full of snow and his eyebrows in full furrow. He's from the next town over. Says he's heard Hildegard can cure the spinning headaches. You glance at her. She nods. Vertigo migraines, she murmurs, already reaching for her pouch of dried gentian root and marjoram. You've seen this recipe before. She soaks the herbs in warm vinegar, adds ground poppy seed, then rubs the mixture behind the ears and along the neck. It's meant to ground the body, to remind it which way is down. The man lies still for 20 minutes, eyes closed, the smell of marjoram drifting like an old lullaby. When he sits up, his voice is quiet. It stopped spinning. He leaves without saying thank you. He doesn't need to. The way he walks says it for him. Later, you and Hildegard sit near the kitchen hearth, watching the snow gather on the windowsills like lazy ghosts. She's sewing a pouch of dried herbs for a novice with pre-prayer headaches. The ones that show up before she even opens her mouth to speak to God. They're fear headaches, Hildegard explains. Fear of not praying well enough, or being heard, or being worthy. You frown. That seems cruel. Cruelty and self-doubt are often roommates. You hand her a thread. She nods thanks. You spend the afternoon writing down her updated classification list. It's grown longer, more poetic, more precise. Some of the new entries. The halo clamp, a band of tightness, often caused by judgment or overthinking. The lantern head, dull ache from staring too long at problems without light. The mirror pulse, a headache that mimics the pain of someone close to you. The iron kiss, a sharp pain that begins with guilt and ends in silence. Each one has its own ritual, its own chant, its own blend, and each one makes you wonder just how many ways a head can hurt and how many ways a soul can ask for help. Historians still argue whether Hildegard's symbolic language was medicine, metaphor, or both. Some say her headache names were just poetic nonsense. Others say she tapped into emotional truths modern diagnoses still miss. You read her scroll again and realize even the names heal. Because when something has a name, it can be known. And when it can be known, it can be met. That evening, she teaches you the reverse spiral chant. It's for headaches that come from too much reflection, she says. When you think so long and hard about yourself, the brain turns inward and gets stuck. You raise an eyebrow. So, a vanity headache? She smirks. A philosophical cramp. You try it, singing outward, letting the sound start small and grow, until it fills the room like a bowl being filled with warm water. It helps. Even your thoughts feel less curled in on themselves. You write your own chant that night. It's not fancy, just a low hum that ends in a sigh. You sing it to yourself as you prepare balm for the next day. You call it the soft edge song. For those mornings when the world feels too sharp and your head can't bear corners. You don't tell anyone. but you catch Hildegard humming it under her breath the next morning. You don't say anything, but your ribs glow a little. The snow keeps falling. The headaches keep coming. But now people arrive not just for herbs or chants, but for language. They come to find out what their pain is called. You watch one woman weep when Hildegard tells her she has the withheld grief ache. She cries not because she's hurt, but because she finally understands why. The snow finally stops, not suddenly but like a sigh running out of breath. By morning, the sky is pale and clear, and the frost on the windows has softened into tiny beads of water that race each other down the glass. You pull on your thickest wool socks and head out into the cloister with a sense of purpose. After days of shadow and silence, the garden paths are visible again. And so is the lavender, brittle but still fragrant beneath its coat of ice. Hildegard is already out there, brushing snow from her favorite bench with a broom that's far too small for the job. Her hair glows gold in the light, though she insists it's just blessed straw with a temper. You join her in silence. You've come to love these shared silences. They're not empty, they're full of agreement, a kind of communion between people who both believe in the sacredness of doing nothing at all, together. The headaches haven't stopped, of course. They never do. Today brings a different kind, a dull, metallic throb from a local merchant who says he's had a steel snake behind his eyes for 3 days straight. You smile at the imagery. Hildegard nods as if this is the most reasonable thing in the world. She gives him a paste of betony and lemon balm to apply to the temples and has him lie down with a scarf of warm nettle leaves draped across his forehead. You hand him a stone to hold in each hand. Why the stones? He asks. To ground the thoughts, you say. Let them drain through your fingers. He doesn't question it. He just breathes. And you swear, his shoulders sink at least an inch. Hildegard is in a writing mood today. She scratches furiously at her manuscript, adding notes in 3 columns: symptom, sound, scent. She says headaches are best healed when treated like a composition. Something layered, textured. You don't just apply a balm. You compose a space. So you help her. You line the walls with fir branches for scent, hum a low tone that mirrors the rhythm of the bells, and arrange the light from the hearth to fall soft and even. You're not treating a headache. You're setting a stage for the mind to unclench. Later, she tells you of a young girl she once treated whose headaches came only during winter. Every year, like clockwork, she'd sit by the door and say the sky was pressing on her, Hildegard recalls. It wasn't the cold, it was the weight of the waiting. You nod. You know that feeling. She treated the girl with warm compresses and dried orange peel, simple things, but also gave her a song to hum when the pressure came. It wasn't a cure, she says, but it reminded her she wasn't trapped inside it. You tuck that away for later, like a compass. That evening, you help a traveling monk who arrives on foot, soaked and bleary-eyed. His headache is a sharp, searing thing that flares when he tries to read or speak for too long. He's afraid it's punishment, that he's broken something sacred. Hildegard listens quietly, then hands him a jar of mint balm and a cup of warm honey tea. Your mind is trying to tell you it's tired, she says. Not that it's wicked. He blinks, then cries into his tea. You sit beside him, say nothing, because sometimes the balm isn't the herb. It's being allowed to rest without guilt. Historians still argue whether Hildegard's patients were physically healed or simply emotionally comforted, whether her cures were effective or just symbolic rituals draped in incense and metaphor. But you've now seen dozens of people walk in with pain and leave with clarity, or peace, or at the very least, hope. And you can't help but think that's a kind of healing too. There's a new chant tonight. This one is yours. You call it the doorway tone. It starts on one note, then gently shifts like someone pushing open a door that creaks into a warmer room. You sing it softly near the hearth while Hildegard arranges new parchment scrolls. You don't tell her it's your song, but you see the corner of her mouth twitch. She knows. Before bed, you find a scrap of parchment tucked into your herb journal. It reads, "Not all pain can be solved, but all pain can be softened." It's not signed. It doesn't need to be. You fall asleep with that line in your hand, and your mind blessedly quiet. It begins with a hum, not yours, not Hildegard's, not even the wind whistling through the cloister rafters like usual. This hum is coming from Sister Beatrix. She's been quiet for weeks, one of those gentle souls who seems to blend into candlelight and never speak unless the silence personally asks her to. But now, this morning, she's standing by the east corridor with her hands on her temples, eyes half closed, and humming the melody you wrote 2 nights ago. The doorway tone. You stop mid-step, heart lodged in your throat. She doesn't see you. She's too deep in it. But when she finally looks up, her face is calm. Not pain-free, but peaceful. as if the pain has curled up on the floor beside her like a tired dog instead of digging its claws into her temples. You don't say anything. You don't have to. You've just witnessed something sacred, and it didn't involve a miracle, just understanding. Hildegard catches you beaming by the cloister well later that day. She raises one eyebrow. Someone's pleased. You nod. Beatrix was humming. She's always humming. My song. Pause. A slow, sly smile. Then, good. It was time your work had ears of its own. She brings out a new scroll today, freshly inked, still drying in parts. On it, her full compendium of head pains and harmonies. It's a towering work, nearly 2 feet tall, filled with cramped script and symbols. She lays it out like a map on the refectory table. You read through the entries, each one labeled like the symptoms are verses in a long, strange psalm. The whisper hook. Pain that sneaks in through self-doubt and lodges behind the right eye. The hollow choir. An ache caused by repressed words, especially in those sworn to silence. The glass mind. Headache from over-reflection and self-criticism, made worse by sleeplessness. The tuning fork, a sudden, sharp throb from conflicting duties or beliefs most common in clergy. Each one comes with a description. A scent, a sound, a stillness. It's part healing manual, part songbook, and entirely unlike anything the church has ever published. Later, she tells you that she doesn't expect most bishops to understand it. It's not meant for them, she says, waving a hand. It's meant for the person lying in the dark wondering if their skull is splitting from sin or sorrow. You nod slowly. You're giving language to pain. She smiles. Yes, so that no one has to hurt namelessly again. That afternoon, a young widow visits from the edge of the valley. Her pain is not sharp or new. It's dull, old, the kind that coats the back of the skull like soot. She describes it as the kind of ache that forgets why it started but refuses to leave. You recognize that kind. Hildegard calls it the ashen halo. You prepare her a cloth soaked in lemon balm, honeyed rosemary, and warmed barley water. She presses it to her crown, breathes, weeps. Hildegard sings the simplest tone in her entire library. Just 2 notes, moving slowly back and forth like a cradle rocking. The woman's eyes close. She sleeps. When she wakes, she doesn't say thank you. She just says, I remember my own name again. Historians still question how seriously to take Hildegard's pain lexicon. Some dismiss it as symbolic, impractical, too poetic to be diagnostic. Others argue it anticipates the modern understanding of trauma, how unspoken feelings twist themselves into the body's tissues and nerves. You think it's both more and less than they say, because what she's offering isn't a diagnosis. It's dignity, and sometimes that's the first thing pain takes. She gives you a new assignment that evening. I want you to make your own map, she says, handing you a blank scroll. Of what? Your headaches. Everyone you've known. You hesitate. Not to wallow, she adds gently. To witness. To name. And then to soften. So you do. You draw 12 entries. You title them in your own words. The tight thought, the birthday ghost, the sharp silence, the answer that never came, the smile that hurt, the too loud kindness, the salted regret, the unfinished goodbye, the cracked mirror, the should have spoken, the lonely room, the morning without light. You don't show it to her, but you leave it in the scriptorium. The next morning, it's been copied in neat Hildegard script and placed beside her official scroll. No commentary, just quiet acknowledgement. You treat 3 people today. None are miraculous turnarounds, but each leaves lighter. Each walks differently. One even laughs. You hum your chant under your breath as you clean the bowls, and wonder if the world might be full of tiny, quiet cures we've forgotten how to notice. The bells sound different today, not in pitch or tone, but in what they summon. You've heard them call to prayer, to meal, to mourning, to birth. But this morning, the bell chimes low and slow, and everyone in the cloister stops mid-step. You glance toward the east hall. Something's changed. Sister Lucia, the oldest in the convent, has fallen. Not dramatically, just a quiet tumble as she reached for her cup. But it was enough to bring the pain back. She has a long, deep headache that crests behind her eyes like a wave that never fully crashes. She calls it her storm ache. You sit with her in the infirmary, holding her hand as Hildegard mixes a fresh balm. Black seed, sage, wild lettuce. Lucia tries to laugh through the pain, but it's hard to laugh when your head is full of thunder. Hildegard kneels beside her, places a cloth soaked in warm rue and myrrh on her temples. Begins to sing, not loudly, but like she's singing to the pain itself, asking it kindly, gently to step back. Lucia sleeps before the 3rd verse ends. You let out the breath you didn't realize you'd been holding. Later that afternoon, the air shifts. A courier arrives from the archbishop. Hildegard reads the letter aloud, half smiling as she does. It's full of elegant worry, concern that her writings have blurred the line between theology and bodily superstition, that her naming of head pains might confuse or mislead the faithful, that perhaps it would be best to focus solely on prayer and accepted doctrine. She folds the letter carefully and uses it to scoop dried valerian root into a jar. Are you worried? You ask. Not at all, she replies, already labeling the jar. But they think you're dangerous. She smiles. They always do. At first, you think about how many people she's helped, people with no language for their pain, no roadmap through the fog, no hope that a voice could rise and soothe the pressure in their skulls. And you decide that maybe dangerous is another word for finally being heard. You spend the evening organizing her salves, jars with names that would terrify a bishop and soothe a peasant. Candle Skull, Hollow Thunder, the Unwept Ache, Grief Light, the Mirror Pulse. You line them on the shelf like precious stones. Each one has a tone. Each one has a rhythm. Each one has a small song written in the margin, just a few notes long, enough for one breath. You test a few, not because you're hurting, but because you've come to understand that songs aren't just medicine. They're memory. And some memories need to be sung back into place. You visit the garden before sleep. The snow is finally gone, leaving behind a messy patchwork of frozen herbs and bent stalks. But the lavender survived. So did the lemon balm. Even the stubborn rue is already putting out little green fists. You smile. You hum your own chant. Viriditas the cat watches you from the window with disdain. You hum louder just to annoy him. Historians still debate whether Hildegard's head pain system was an early form of psychosomatic theory, or simply a poetic way to describe pain in an age without neurology. They argue about whether her chants triggered healing through breath control, neurological entrainment, or good old-fashioned placebo. None of them mention the way you feel heard when someone gives your pain a name. None of them mention how Hildegard always listens before she speaks, or how she looks at someone cradling their head in their hands and never says, "You're overreacting." She says, "Let's find your note." And then she hums until the pain answers back. You fall asleep tonight with a fresh salve beneath your nose, violet, myrtle, and cedarwood. The scent is soft and cool and safe. You dream of water trickling over stone, of light pulsing behind your eyes, not pain, but something waiting to bloom. You wake with the memory of the chant still in your breath, and a sense that your body is less alone in itself. Spring arrives quietly, not with fanfare, not with trumpets of green or sudden sunbursts. Just the slow softening of air, the way boots no longer echo so sharply on stone, the way your bones creak less when you wake. You notice it first in the lavender. Tiny buds reaching like cautious fingertips toward the light, and in your head, stillness. Not silence exactly, but ease. A sense that your thoughts aren't trying to outrun each other anymore. The pain, when it comes, is smaller, sharper in shape, easier to name. You've learned its dialect. You've learned your dialect. You've learned to hum before it roars. Hildegard is finishing her final scroll. She calls it the harmonics of pain and praise. You ask if that title will fly with the bishops. She smiles. It's not meant to fly. It's meant to root. She lets you add the final entries. You take your time. You write them not as prescriptions but invitations. For the ache that arrives with old regrets, hum while tracing rosemary oil behind the ears. For the tightness that follows too much kindness unreturned, soak feet in warmed barley water and sit near someone who listens without fixing. For the pain of things unsaid, write the words, burn the page, inhale frankincense, exhale judgment. You sign your name beside hers, not under. Beside, she insisted. A young novice joins you one morning, hands on her head, eyes wide and scared. It feels like my thoughts are screaming, she whispers. I can't get them to stop. You don't reach for a jar. You don't open your chant book. You just sit beside her and say, I know that one. That's called the spindle spiral. It comes when the mind is trying to untangle too many threads. She sobs once, then breathes, then nods. You hum, slowly, gently, and hand her a cloth soaked in lemon balm and mint. She presses it to her forehead like a benediction. You stay until the tremble in her shoulders quiets. Later, you and Hildegard walk in the garden. The rue is tall again. The sage is fuzzy and wild. The cat has once again claimed the bench as his throne. She turns to you with that half-smile. I'm glad you stayed. You blink. I didn't know I had a choice. Exactly, she says and laughs. She shows you a new chant she's written. It's for grief-born headaches, the kind that come not from tension, but from holding too many goodbyes in the space behind your eyes. You hum it together under the apple tree. The blossoms are beginning to bloom. Historians still argue over whether Hildegard of Bingen was a mystic, a healer, a scientist, or a poet. Whether her work belongs to medicine or myth. Whether she named pain out of insight or desperation. You no longer care how they categorize her. You only care that her voice taught yours how to listen, that her fingers taught yours how to trace circles, and pause before pressing. That her chance taught your silence how to sing again. One day a letter arrives, an invitation to teach. You glance at Hildegard. She nods. You're ready. I'm scared. You're still ready. You take your scrolls, yourselves, your chants, your awkward little softage song, and you pack them up like a pilgrim heading towards something more than a destination. You leave at dawn. The cloister behind you is still, but as you pass beneath the archway, you feel the hum rise in your chest again. Not pain, not fear, just music, just memory, just the rhythm of someone who once thought headaches were a curse, now walking into the world with balm in one hand and the other hand free for whoever needs it. And now, after all that movement, that study, those songs and salves and soft glances exchanged by candlelight, it's time to let your breath deepen. Let it pull gently into your chest like a tide returning home. The candles are flickering lower now. The snow is long gone. The herbs have returned to their soft chatter beneath the garden soil. You can still smell the lavender, can't you? Faint, sun-warmed, with a whisper of mint on the air. The walls of the cloister no longer echo. They hold their silence like a lullaby. And somewhere out there, a scroll sits on a wooden table, titled by hand, The Harmonics of Pain and Praise. It doesn't claim to cure all things, but it does know how to name them. And that's enough for now. Your own breath is part of that scroll in its own way. It's steadier now, slower. You've traveled far tonight, through temples tight with pressure, through songs hummed at dusk, through compresses and chants, and the ever-so-slight magic of attention. You've listened. That's the most sacred part of healing. Even now, your body is unwinding like thread across a loom, each muscle softening, each thought no longer trying to win a race. Your jaw loose now, your hands unclenched, your mind drifting but not lost, just floating. The pain doesn't need to be gone, it just needs to be seen. And here, under the sky, with these songs still lingering in the rafters, you are fully, gently, deeply seen. Let that be enough. Let it be more than enough. And if tomorrow brings more ache, so be it. You'll greet it not with fear, but with a name. And maybe a hum. Because you've learned by now, even headaches can sing. And tonight, you sleep with silence at last. Hey guys, tonight we sail away from deadlines, calendars, and buzzing notifications. Instead, you land barefoot on the powdery white sands of an ancient Samoan beach where the air tastes like sea salt and burnt coconut husk, and the only schedule is the slow sway of a palm frond shadow crawling across your leg. The sun has just begun its lazy dip into the horizon, lighting the sky with thick strokes of coral and tangerine. You squint into the brightness, not because you're in a hurry, but because even blinking feels like too much effort out here. You probably won't survive this kind of lifestyle if you're the type who measures worth in productivity charts and caffeine-fueled checklists. Here, doing nothing is an achievement. It's sacred, and it's about to unravel everything you thought you knew about ambition. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, leave a comment with your current location and local time. We're building a sleepy little map of calm across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin, fittingly, with nothing. You sit at the edge of a canoe pulled onto the shore that would warm beneath you, worn smooth by generations of quiet sitting. A tiny crab sidles past your foot, indifferent to your presence. The air is thick with that post-rain smell, damp greenery, salty wind, something faintly floral you can't quite name. You don't need to name it. A village elder sits nearby, chewing lazily on betel nut, his teeth stained red, his eyelids heavy. He nods once in your direction. It could mean hello, or yes, or I saw you, or just still breathing. In ancient Samoa, nuance lives in stillness. You notice quickly that there are no chimes, no hour bells, no frantic calls to prayer or political rallies. There is rhythm here, yes, but it's not yours to command. The day unfolds like a fan, slow and soundless. There are no minutes here, only the space between them. People move at the speed of purpose. which to you might look like loafing. A woman walks to the ocean with a woven basket, stops mid-path to stretch and stare at a heron standing ankle-deep in the shallows. She watches the bird longer than it would take to catch a dozen fish. Then she returns, empty-handed, utterly satisfied. You wonder if she forgot what she came for. She didn't. The point was being there. The basket was just her excuse. Welcome to island time. In modern society, island time gets tossed around as a cute excuse for being late. But here, in old Samoa, it was a social philosophy. A rhythm designed not to delay work but to ensure it never robbed the soul of quiet. Even the language helped you slow down, no sharp consonants, no guttural urgency. Just soft vowels and longer pauses. Conversations that meandered. Agreements that waited for your gut to agree. Historians still argue whether Samoan timekeeping was purely intuitive or if there were hidden systems at play: moon cycles, tree shadows, wave patterns. Likely it was all of these. And none. A culture this laid back doesn't explain itself to outsiders. You pass by a cluster of fails. Open-air huts with thatched roofs held up by thick wooden posts. There are no walls. Life, after all, doesn't need to be boxed in. Inside one, a child naps belly down on a woven mat. In another, a group of women shell taro roots, laughing softly. Their laughter is not a reaction. It's an offering. Joy here isn't something you catch like a sneeze. It's a breeze that floats through you whether or not you're paying attention. You try to imagine your own home stripped of its walls. Would people feel exposed? Unsafe? Vulnerable? Here it's the opposite. Walls are seen as a way to hide from community. And hiding, in a culture built on shared time, is considered a kind of sadness. Even at night, when fireflies blink around the village like tiny lanterns and the sea hisses against the rocks, people lie side by side in large family houses, whole families breathing the same thick tropical air, murmuring into sleep together. You don't rush to bed. Bed comes to you. The first Samoan villages weren't carved from conquest or walled for protection. They weren't planned. They grew. A few fails under some palms, a fire pit in the middle, a path to the lagoon. Nothing more. The sea brought what was needed. The earth forgave laziness, and from this forgiving land bloomed a people who didn't mind waiting for storms to pass, fruit to ripen, children to cry it out without interference. Even the gods, according to old stories, had a nap once in a while. One legend tells of Tagaloa, the high god, who created the islands not in a frenzy of omnipotent power, but while slowly lounging in the sky. He flicked bits of coral into the sea and watched them grow into land, occasionally dozing off mid-creation. You can't make that up. The world was literally built between naps. By the time the stars appear, you're already feeling the pull of stillness. The kind that doesn't demand you stop, but invites you to pause. You notice things you'd normally scroll past. The feel of a mosquito landing on your arm, not biting, just testing. The sound of wet leaves squishing underfoot. A distant ukulele, probably off-tune, playing a song with only 3 notes, and those 3 notes lasting longer than most pop songs back home. Fringe anthropologists have suggested that what Westerners call laziness in Pacific cultures may actually be a sophisticated time awareness system, one in which work expands only as much as needed and no more. The rest is stillness. Sacred stillness. You blink. The stars haven't changed position. You blink again. Neither has your heartbeat. You're in sync now. Not with a calendar or a clock, but with the wind shift that turns a wave into foam, the hush between frog chirps, the lazy arc of a fruit bat gliding overhead. That is time here. That is the beginning of nothing. And you're right on time. You wake up, though you're not sure you ever really slept. The sky has shifted barely. A deep bruised violet now stretches across the horizon, and everything is quieter than quiet, so quiet, in fact, that even your own breathing feels like it might be interrupting something sacred. You're still lying in that open-air fail, and beside you, someone's grandfather is snoring softly. Not obnoxiously. Just rhythmically. Like an old boat rocking gently in the tide. No alarm clock. No digital chirping. Just the thinnest golden light slipping between the roof thatch and the smell of salt-drenched wood and faint charcoal ash still lingering from last night's fire. It would almost be poetic if it wasn't so smugly peaceful. You roll onto your side. Someone is frying breadfruit over a fire pit. They are not hurrying. They are turning each slice with such precision that you swear the act must be ceremonial. And in a way it is, because here, in this place, breakfast isn't just the first meal, it's the first moment. And moments aren't meant to be rushed. In your world, breakfast is toast in your left hand, keys in your right, a screen blinking your attention away from your own hunger. But in ancient Samoa, they had a better idea. You get up slowly, because that's the only way anyone does anything around here, and wander toward the ocean. Not a single person stops you to ask what your plans are. There are no plans, that's the point. Plans are for people who believe the future is theirs to control. Samoans? They believe in rhythm, not control. Rhythm of weather. Rhythm of bodies. Rhythm of time moving like syrup down a warm stone. And nowhere is that more clear than in their approach to work. You probably assume work is synonymous with sweat, urgency, deadlines. A thing to conquer, to power through, to brag about afterward. But here, work is simply movement that serves life. Nothing more. And a surprising amount of life, it turns out, can be served without much movement at all. You pass two men repairing a canoe. Except they aren't technically repairing it yet. One is gently running his palm across the wood, slowly, like it's a sleeping animal. The other is chewing something green and watching the sun. Eventually, maybe in 5 minutes, maybe in 2 hours, they'll start. Maybe. Historians still debate how much of ancient Samoan labor was structured by ritual versus instinct. There were no written work schedules. No to-do lists. Just a deep, lived sense of when things needed to be done and, just as crucially, when they didn't. You hear someone behind you say, "Sa liga legaliu I luvevela." Don't work in the heat. Not because you'll die of heat stroke, because it's not polite. It's considered disrespectful to your own body, to the gods, and possibly even to the task itself. Imagine that. Labor as a sacred act must be paired with ease. Or it becomes ugly. You find a hammock strung between two breadfruit trees. You lie down. Naturally, from here, the whole village looks like it's in slow motion. A child pushes a stick along the dirt with a bent coconut shell. A woman braids her own hair, eyes half-lidded. Chickens walk wherever they want, completely unaware that in other civilizations, they'd be the center of a productivity meme. The hammock creaks, and in that creak, something occurs to you. Everyone here seems to be resting before they're tired. As if weariness isn't something to push through but to avoid entirely. And rest itself? Not a reward, but a default state. One elder once said, "A man who lies down before sunset hears the night more clearly." It sounded like a proverb. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's just how they talk around here. Like the ocean, slow, deep, slightly amused that you're still trying to understand it. A mainstream fact about Samoan society. They were one of the few pre-industrial cultures where division of labor was determined not just by gender or age, but by vibe. Yes, vibe. If someone looked too tense, they were sent to go nap under a tree. If they looked peaceful, they were invited to sit near the fire and supervise by simply existing nearby. It was believed that your energy, your mafana, or emotional warmth could shape the outcome of a task. And bad energy? Contagious. Like a yawn or stress. So they managed it early, gently, with hammocks. That hammock you're in? It's older than it looks. Probably woven by a group of aunties in between gossip and naps. It doesn't sag, it surrenders. Which is really the whole theme here. The breeze picks up. You blink again. The same mango has been hanging over your head for hours now. It looks ripe, but it hasn't fallen yet, and nobody's picked it. Why? Because in ancient Samoa, harvesting fruit too soon was seen as impatient. And impatience, much like arrogance or shouting, was just bad manners. It disrupted the collective peace. It said you didn't trust nature to take care of itself. So you wait. That mango, it will fall. Just not now, later, or tomorrow, or never. And when it does, someone, maybe a child, maybe an old man, will scoop it up and eat it in 3 bites, juice dribbling down their chin. No rush, no sermon, just a simple rhythm between earth and hand. Giving and receiving. One particularly fringe theory among ethnoanthropologists even posits that Samoan culture's tendency toward relaxed labor habits may have acted as a kind of civilizational immune system, warding off overcolonization by appearing too unproductive to exploit effectively. It's ironic. The very thing colonizers mocked, Samoan slowness, might have been a quiet form of rebellion, a societal-level shrug. Try to force your schedules on us? We'll just nap through it. Again, by midday, you've seen maybe one real job done. A fishing net has been repaired slowly by a woman who laughed through most of it with her neighbor. That's it. Yet the village hums with ease. No one's worried. No one's stressed. And miraculously, no one is bored. Doing nothing isn't boring here. It's normal. It's respected. Sometimes it's even expected. You lie there, still in that hammock, and realize something wild. You haven't checked the time once. Not because you forgot, because you stopped caring. And just then, the mango falls right into your lap. Of course it does. You're still holding that mango. It's warm from the sun, slightly bruised on one side, with that unmistakable tropical aroma, sweet, fermented, like sunshine in fruit form. You consider biting into it. Then, like everything else here, you decide to wait. Just a little longer. A soft breeze rolls through the palms above you and the fronds rustle in slow applause, like the trees are proud of you for not rushing. You'd laugh, but that might break the spell. Around you, the day unfolds not in minutes but in sensations. A dog wanders lazily past, tail low, tongue out. A young boy is attempting to climb a tree badly, and an older man just nods once in quiet approval as he falls and tries again. You start to notice how everyone seems to move like dancers in a very slow ritual. No movement is wasted. Even a scratch on the chin is done like it matters. And maybe it does, because in ancient Samoa, stillness wasn't absence. It was observation. You follow a trail past the edge of the village where the trees thicken and the shade deepens. You expect something to happen. It doesn't. And that's the magic. You find an elder sitting beneath a breadfruit tree. He isn't meditating. He isn't praying. He's just sitting. One eye closed, the other may be open, maybe not. You can't tell. A shallow bowl of kava sits beside him, untouched. A fly lands on his arm and stays there for a good 20 seconds. He doesn't flick it away. You sit a little ways off, unsure if joining is allowed or rude or both. He doesn't move, doesn't speak. But slowly, you begin to mirror him. You stop checking your posture. You stop counting birds. You stop listening for something profound. And eventually, you stop thinking entirely. You just sit. Welcome to the ancient Samoan art of sitting still. This isn't meditation in the modern, app-guided, optimize your mind for performance sense. There's no breath control, no mindfulness checklist. It's not even formalized. It just is. Historians still argue whether this cultural habit was born from spiritual traditions, ecological necessity, or simply a collective preference for unstructured time. But regardless of its roots, the effect is undeniable. Generations of people who were really, really good at just being. And it wasn't seen as laziness. It was a skill. You see, in Samoa, an elder wasn't just someone older, they were someone who could sit the longest without needing to fill the silence. Their wisdom wasn't measured by books read or battles fought, but by how long they could hold a gaze, nod once, and make you feel like the conversation had already happened. And sometimes it had. There's a story often told quietly in hushed tones of a high chief who settled a dispute between two villages by showing up, sitting cross-legged under a tree for 6 hours and leaving without saying a single word. No one knows if it was planned. But by the time he stood, both sides had already worked it out themselves. He just sat, and that was enough. There's something radical about it, isn't there? In your world, doing nothing is considered lazy, irresponsible, unproductive. But here, doing nothing is a tool, a way to recalibrate, a way to teach, because when you sit still long enough, the world reveals its secrets. You start to notice the shape of the shadows, how they change. You see the ants forming predictable trails. You realize the birds don't sing at random. They wait, too. Even the ocean, that constant sound machine on the edge of your hearing, begins to shift. You hear the difference between wave and wind, between crash and curl. You didn't know you needed this. But your breath did. Your bones did. And just when you're about to nod off, something unexpected happens. The elder speaks. One word. Fa logo. Listen. And then silence again. Not a command. Not a lecture. Just an invitation. So you do. You listen. To the birds. To the insects. To the whispers of the leaves. To the rhythm of nothingness wrapping itself around you like a warm woven mat. You recall now that Samoan culture didn't rely on written language for most of its early history. Knowledge wasn't etched into stone. It was passed from lips to ears, heart to heart. And the pauses? They mattered just as much as the words. Children were taught early to listen for the words between words, to hear what wasn't said, to wait for the breath before the story. One fringe theory suggests that this deep-rooted listening culture evolved because of Samoa's geography, small islands, tight communities, limited space for mistakes. You had to really understand someone, or things fell apart fast. Miscommunication wasn't a nuisance, it was a threat to harmony. So people slowed down. You don't just listen here, you absorb. And when someone speaks, their voice enters like a tide, not a tap. It rises, washes through, and recedes, leaving meaning in its wake. Back in the village, you see this in action. A grandmother is telling a story to two little girls, all seated around a bowl of water. She pauses often, sometimes mid-sentence. The girls don't interrupt. They wait. And when she starts again, It's as if nothing had paused at all. The water in the bowl ripples gently with the breeze. Nobody points it out, but you can feel it's part of the story somehow. She ends with a chuckle and a long sigh. The children giggle. You don't know what the story was, but it doesn't matter. You felt it. You start to understand now. In ancient Samoa, stories weren't told to impress. They were told to hold, to cradle the listener for a while, to rock them gently toward understanding, even if that understanding never arrived. There's no punchline, no moral. No, and the lesson is just presence. And that presence, soft, steady, undemanding, is what built an entire way of life. One that made room for mystery, for daydreaming, for silence. In that silence, a fruit falls. Somewhere. You don't see it, but you hear the soft thud. And once again, you wait, because maybe, just maybe, that fruit is for you. You wake again to something you can't quite place. Does not sound exactly, more like the absence of it. A stillness that feels heavier than before. The kind of quiet that presses lightly on your skin, like a warm blanket you didn't ask for but suddenly need. You're back in the veil, but the light has changed. A pale morning haze now floats between the trees, casting long slivers of soft gold across the ground. Dew clings to leaves like secrets. Somewhere, a rooster gives a half-hearted crow. Even he seems too relaxed to try again. You stretch slowly. Every movement feels like it echoes in this space between things. No one's rushing. No one ever does. You don't even hear anyone walking. Yet you're not alone. As you step outside, you catch them. A semicircle of elders seated under a pandanus tree, not speaking, not looking at each other, just being there. One of them coughs. The others don't react. Eventually, a much younger man, maybe in his early 20s, joins the group, sits cross-legged at the end of the circle, and looks down at his hands. He's not seeking approval. He's not waiting for permission. He's just sinking in. This is what a conversation looks like here. You wander past them, unsure if you've interrupted. But nobody blinks. You are quite literally part of the silence now. Because in ancient Samoa, silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred. It was where most of the talking happened. You hear a whisper on the wind, though it's probably just the breeze. Then a voice, not loud, not commanding, just calm and certain, begins to speak. You look back. It's one of the elders. Everyone leans in slightly, but no one moves otherwise. His words are slow, spaced, deliberate. Not dramatic. Just patient. You can't understand the language. But the tone is clear. He's telling a story. And in ancient Samoa, stories didn't just entertain, they trained you to listen. To wait. To receive. Every sentence is followed by silence. Not to let it sink in. That's a Western thing. Here, the silence is the message. You're reminded of something odd you heard from a visiting anthropologist who once lived here for 2 years and barely spoke in his first 6 months. Not because he wasn't allowed, but because, as his host mother put it, your ears aren't hungry yet. Historians still debate whether this deeply contemplative culture developed despite its oral traditions or because of them. Without books, you relied on memory. And memory in Samoa was sharpened not by memorizing lists, but by feeling the story unfold. Like watching the tide rise grain by grain, you take a seat nearby, not in the circle, but close enough to feel its gravity. The story continues and something strange begins to happen. You start imagining the words. You hear waves. You smell smoke. You see, in your mind, a young man paddling into a storm he knows he can't survive. The elder hasn't said this, hasn't described it, not in any detail, but your body is creating the scene anyway. That's how stories work here. They don't paint the picture for you. They hand you the brush. You blink. The story's done. No applause. No, thank you. Just another long silence. Then, slowly, the group disperses. Some head toward the cooking fire. Others lie back and stare at the sky. The youngest doesn't move. He's still sitting, eyes closed. You realize he's still listening, and maybe the story's still being told. You get up and follow the winding footpath toward the cliffs that overlook the ocean. The view is staggering. Vast turquoise waves slap gently at volcanic rock, and seabirds spiral lazily overhead, gliding on invisible air currents like they've got nowhere urgent to be. You lie down on a warm flat stone and stare up at the sky. Clouds drift like whales in the distance. A question floats into your mind. What if doing nothing is a form of wisdom? Not laziness, not procrastination, but actual clarity. The kind that comes only when you stop cramming your brain with tasks and noise and content and pressure and just exist. You imagine trying to explain this to someone back home. I spent the day lying on a rock, watching a cloud learn to become a bird. Yeah. They call you unemployed. But here, that's just Tuesday. You hear laughter in the distance, a soft burst quickly swallowed by the wind. Not the loud, performative kind you're used to. This laughter is closer to water lapping against a dock. It doesn't demand your attention, but you can't ignore it either. You follow the sound to find two women seated beside a cooking pit. They're weaving mats out of long, dried pandanus leaves, talking slowly, laughing occasionally. You recognize one of them. She's the grandmother from earlier, the one who told the story beside the bowl of water. You sit nearby, not saying a word. Eventually, she looks up at you and smiles. She holds out a half-woven mat, offers it to you. You reach for it, clumsy, unsure what to do. She says something in Samoan, then laughs. Not at you. Just at the moment, she shows you how to fold one of the leaves. It takes you 4 tries. She shrugs. Perfectly fine. You spend the next hour, or was it 2, folding and weaving. Nothing fancy. Just slow, steady movements. Every now and then she sings a line of something that might be a lullaby. Her friend joins in, a little off-key. It's beautiful. You start to forget what day it is. You start to forget why you came. And it feels right. There's no expectation for you to finish the mat. No pressure to improve. No feedback loop. Just the action itself, quietly validating your existence. One of them suddenly stands and points to the ocean. You look up. A long canoe carved from a single tree is sliding toward shore, carried by the current. 2 men paddle with slow, rhythmic strokes. They aren't racing. They aren't shouting. They're returning. And that's enough. As the canoe lands, a group gathers, not to cheer, but to help carry it. No orders. No organizing. Just quiet cooperation. Everyone knows what to do. It's a dance. You watch as they pull fish from the net, enough for everyone, but not more. A little girl brings one to the fire. No one tells her what to do. She just knows. And in that moment, you realize something that catches in your throat. They're not doing nothing. They're doing everything without urgency, without panic, without ego. And somehow it all still gets done. The fire is barely more than a whisper now, tiny blue flames licking at the bottom of the cooking pot, casting shy shadows across the circle of woven mats. You sit cross-legged, belly full, fingers still sticky with roasted breadfruit. The sun has ducked behind a hill, and the air has cooled slightly, carrying the smell of charred fish and damp earth. You don't want to move. Nobody around you seems to either. This is not after-dinner fatigue. It's ritual. It's digestion as a spiritual act. The stars haven't arrived yet, but the first bat has. It flaps silently across the sky, one giant, slow-winged yawn. Nobody points. Nobody gasps. Here, even the animals are allowed their dignity. You glance down at your lap. The mango pit from earlier rests there like a trophy. You still haven't let it go. You probably won't. It feels earned somehow, proof that waiting has rewards. To your left, someone begins to hum. No song you recognize. It rises like smoke from their throat, spiraling into the trees, soft enough that you can't tell whether it's a tune or a memory. It doesn't matter. You lean back against the post of the fail and exhale. And just then, it hits you. Nothing feels urgent. Not your to-do list. Not your inbox. Not the thousands of questions constantly buzzing in your brain. They're all gone. Not silenced. Just absorbed. Like rain into hot stone. Welcome to the coconut philosophy. Yes, you heard that right. Coconut. The ancient Samoan approach to life, if boiled down to one visual metaphor, might just be the coconut. You see, coconuts don't hurry. They grow where they fall. They ripen at their own pace. They need no intervention, no reminders, no pressure. They simply are. And here's the kicker. Once ripe, they give everything. The husk can be burned. The shell used for bowls. The flesh eaten. The milk drunk. The fibers woven. The leaves braided into baskets. Even the roots? Useful. The tree, once done with giving, eventually topples and becomes firewood. And never once does it complain. There's a quiet wisdom in that. A way of living that's about becoming, not performing. You ask one of the elders, quietly, politely, if that's really how people see coconuts here. He chuckles. Then, with a voice roughened by age and kava, he says, we try to live like that. Strong on the outside. Sweet inside. And when we fall, we make ourselves useful. It's not poetic. It's instructional. You look around and realize you're surrounded by coconut logic. The mats beneath you? Coconut fiber. The oil rubbed into your hands earlier by a small boy offering blessing before dinner? Coconut. The spoon someone used to stir the taro paste? A carved coconut shell. Even the torchlight glistens off coconut oil rubbed into forearms and hair. And no one's making a big deal about it. It just is. This kind of embedded philosophy, the everyday spirituality of objects, is part of what made Samoan society so fluid, so sustainable, so calm. When everything has a use, nothing is wasted. When everything takes its time, nothing feels late. You watch as a teenage girl cracks open a coconut using nothing but a rock and 3 practiced blows. She pours the milk into a wooden cup, takes one sip, and then passes it silently to the oldest person present. Age before thirst. Another lesson. Historians note that the coconut was more than just a resource here, it was a teacher. Children learned patience by waiting for coconuts to fall. They learned generosity by sharing its meat. They learned timing by watching its slow decay. Even warriors, yes, Samoa had them, were compared to coconuts, hard to crack, but if you did, you'd better be ready for what's inside. One odd little fringe tale even says the gods once sent a coconut down from the sky, mistaking it for a divine egg. When it cracked open, spilling milk and meat instead of fire and lightning, they laughed and decided that this, not war, would be their gift to the people. You sit with that image for a while. Gods tossing fruit, laughing at their own mistake, creating a peaceful world on accident. You kind of love it. By now, the fire has gone down to glowing coals. The singing has faded. A few people have already curled onto their mats. One by one, the stars begin to show themselves, shy little sparks at first, then a full quilt across the sky. And still, no one says time for bed. Sleep comes like weather here. You don't decide on it. It just arrives. You decide to lie back on the mat. The ground is firm but not unfriendly. The coconut trees creak slightly in the breeze, like elders whispering old gossip they've long since stopped caring about. Your eyelids grow heavy, but then something stirs you. A quiet scuffle of feet, a gentle hush, and a voice, deep, clear, and oddly musical, beginning to speak. It's another story. This one isn't directed at anyone in particular. The storyteller just begins, and the entire village listens. He speaks of a young boy who sat beneath a coconut tree for 3 days and 3 nights, waiting for the perfect fruit to drop. He ignored the easy ones, the overripe ones, even the ones handed to him by neighbors. He wanted the right one. On the 4th day, the story goes, the boy finally received it. But it wasn't a coconut. It was the tree itself, bending down, wrapping its fronds around him, saying, "You waited longer than anyone. So you get everything." The storyteller pauses. No one laughs. No one claps, because they've all heard this one before. And they know it's not really about the coconut. It's about waiting without wanting, resting without needing, being still without asking for reward. The story ends. A few people sigh. One man starts to snore. A dog circles twice, then flops down near the fire. You stay awake a little longer, staring at the stars through the coconut leaves. And for once, you don't wish you were anywhere else. You don't wish you were doing anything else. You just are. Like the coconut, strong outside, sweet within, and finally completely still. A soft gray light seeps across the horizon like a curtain slowly pulling back, and the breeze smells like damp earth and salt again, freshly brewed from the sea. There are no roosters this time, no human chatter. Just the faint rhythmic whoosh of waves and the slow clatter of a single paddle in the distance. You sit up slowly on your woven mat. Your joints crack politely. The air is warm already, but the shade still holds the night's coolness like a folded blanket. You stand, stretch, and begin to walk, no direction, no goal. Just movement for the sake of moving. Soon you find yourself by the water's edge, barefoot on cool, packed sand. There's a canoe bobbing in the shallows, tethered by nothing more than a thick root tied to a piece of driftwood. Nearby, 2 boys are collecting shells. They're not talking, not competing, just crouched, scanning the tide, every now and then exchanging a look that says, "That one's good." You join them for a while, picking up a shell, then putting it back. No one corrects you. No one asks if you're doing it right. You aren't expected to achieve anything. And it's strangely liberating, because here even fishing begins with waiting. Farther out, a man in his 60s is wading into the sea. He's holding something strange. A long, curved stick with a looped string at the end. You think it might be a fishing tool, but it looks more like a question mark. He casts the line into the water, then sits in the surf. Not standing, not ankle deep, just sits waist deep, facing the horizon. It's unclear whether the hook is bait, or if it's even a hook at all. It might just be string. You glance over at one of the shell-gathering boys and raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Sometimes they fish. Sometimes they just ask the sea what it's feeling. That's the literal translation. You try to process it, then stop trying, because you're starting to realize something. Not everything here is meant to be processed. Some things are just meant to be done without expecting them to lead anywhere. Like the man in the water. He's now leaning back on his elbows, completely relaxed. the line floating aimlessly beside him. He might be catching dinner. He might be meditating. He might be both. This, you're told later, is a long-standing tradition in Samoa, particularly among older men. To fish without urgency. To cast a line with no certainty. To accept the possibility of nothing. And still show up. Historians still argue whether this non-fishing practice was ceremonial, spiritual, or just a way to sneak some alone time. One theory even suggests it was designed as a deliberate break in social rhythm, a way to step outside the village tempo and reconnect with silence. Whatever the reason, it continues today. Quietly. Without fanfare, you decide to try it. A younger man hands you a line. No rod. No reel. Just a coil of twine and a bent piece of shell tied to the end. He points toward the tide. You walk in, feel the water rise past your knees, your hips, your waist. And then you sit, shockingly peaceful. The waves push and pull around you. A slow massage of salt and rhythm. Your line drifts lazily, unbothered by the absence of bait. A crab scuttles by your foot, then disappears. Something brushes your ankle. Seaweed? A fish? You don't flinch, because you're learning the secret now. The point isn't the fish, it's the floating. Back on shore, two women are weaving palm leaves into long strips. One of them sings softly, then pauses for a full minute before resuming. The other doesn't interrupt. She simply nods and continues braiding. Even the music here breathes. And the sea around you, this massive ancient presence, doesn't demand anything either. It accepts your string and your stillness without judgment. Carries your line away from you, then returns it. Over and over. Like a lesson. Like forgiveness. You lie back into the water, just enough to let your head float. The world tilts slightly, and the sky stretches wide above you, endless and blue. You blink. Clouds drift overhead like slow-moving thoughts. You let them pass. You don't catch anything. You don't care. Eventually, the man beside you stands. He hasn't spoken all morning. He nods to you once, then walks back to shore. You follow. There's no sense of victory, no tally of results. It wasn't about getting something out of the sea. It was about giving yourself to it for a while. One older woman tells you later, over a bowl of coconut stew, if the ocean wants you to eat, it'll send you something. If not, maybe it thinks you need humility instead. Then she smiles, and you realize they're not joking when they say the ocean is part of the family here. It's not a resource. It's a relative, and relatives aren't always generous. But they're always part of you. There's even a phrase in old Samoan prayers, Luveza e Luvelia. The ocean is not foolish. It knows what you need, and it gives when it's time. Not before. You step back from the fire, full again, sleepy in that perfect, heavy way. A soft breeze rises. You hear someone snoring under a nearby tree. A dog lifts its head, looks at you, and then decides it's not worth the energy. You lie on your back and stare at the sky. And for the first time in forever, you stop asking what's next. Because nothing is, and everything already was. The sky today is the color of milky tea. Not stormy, not clear, just quietly undecided. A heavy humidity hangs in the air, but no one seems to mind. Shirts stick slightly to backs. Hair curls more than usual. The chickens look mildly offended, but even they don't complain. You're seated beside the village's central path, legs stretched out, back against a tree that seems to have known generations of leaners. You're sipping something cool, coconut water spiked with a hint of fermented breadfruit, someone says, and watching the day unfold the same way you've watched it unfold for how many days now? You've lost count, which is good. There's a saying in the village, only clocks grow old. And you're starting to believe it. You haven't touched your phone in what feels like a lifetime. And still, the sun rises. The world spins. Your lungs expand and contract like waves. Miraculous. A small group has gathered nearby, just beyond a crooked mango tree. They're holding a meeting, but not the kind you're used to. No chairs. No whiteboard. No one leading with a PowerPoint. Just 5 or 6 people, elders, teenagers, mothers, cousins, seated in a wide circle on mats, speaking slowly, taking long pauses between sentences, often leaning back and gazing at the sky before continuing. This is the Fono, a traditional Samoan council. And unlike the world you came from, where meetings often feel like battles to dominate the room, the Fono is more like a musical piece. A conversation where silence is a verse, and nobody rushes to the chorus. One man speaks. He uses only 15 words. Everyone listens for twice as long as it takes him to speak. Then a woman nods, and her words come even slower. 3 words. Then nothing. A long inhale. A sigh. You think maybe she forgot what she was going to say, but you're wrong. She was letting it land. Historians believe this deep deliberative style is one of the oldest intact governance structures in the Pacific. And not because it's flashy, but because it's functional. It respects time. It assumes that thought takes effort. And it treats listening as a form of labor. You're told the young are trained from childhood to watch the phono. Not to speak, not to join. Just to observe. To understand when a silence means agreement and when it means dissent. To hear the shape of consensus forming like mist, not thunderously, but slowly, delicately, through quiet nods and eye contact. One quirky footnote from a British colonizer's journal in the 1800s complains that Samoan meetings were infuriatingly unhurried and impossible to interrupt. Which honestly sounds like a glowing review. And still, things get done. The paths are repaired. The harvest is distributed. Disputes are resolved, and all without raised voices or bullet points. You wonder what it would feel like to live in a world where quiet is power, where restraint is persuasive, where no one interrupts, not because of rules but because interrupting just feels wrong. There's something revolutionary about it. A toddler stumbles across the meeting space, squealing. No one shushes him. He pauses mid-squeal to pluck a bug off the ground and hold it up like treasure. One of the elders smiles, then gently guides him back to his mother with a single raised eyebrow. That's the extent of the discipline. No yelling, no shame, just a quiet redirection. You realize that even parenting here carries the same energy. It's not about control. It's about shaping the air around the child until they float in the right direction. You ask someone later if this style ever fails. She raises an eyebrow and says sometimes people take longer to get where they're going. But that's not the same as being lost. She's right. You think about your world, one that values action over process, certainty over doubt, where decisions must be made fast and silence is often seen as weakness. Here, it's the opposite. Here, they let the silence chew on the question before answering. You return to your tree, watching the circle dissolve as the meeting ends. No vote was taken, no summary sent, but somehow everyone seems to know what happens next. That night, a new path is cleared through the dense brush at the village's edge. You join the effort. No tools at first, just hands pulling back vines, voices softly humming in rhythm, laughter bubbling up when someone slips. It's not efficient by any Western standard, but it's connected, and slowly a narrow trail appears. Someone begins laying stones along the sides 2 at a time. You ask if the path leads anywhere specific. An older man shrugs. Not yet. So, you're building a path to nowhere? Yes, he says, smiling. But someday, someone might need to go that way, and that's all he offers. That's all he needs to offer. You stay up late that night, staring at the canopy of stars above the Vale, thinking about that path, about doing something not for productivity, but for possibility. Laying stones now, just in case a traveler might need them later. You feel the muscles in your hands aching from the work, but not the kind of ache that demands rest. The kind that reminds you, you did something good, and tomorrow you'll probably do less, but it will matter just as much. You wake to the sound of sweeping, not a loud scrape or bristle, but a soft, rhythmic hush across the earth. Back and forth, back and forth. You open your eyes slowly, and there she is, a woman in her late 60s, barefoot, holding a handmade broom of bundled palm fibers. She's not sweeping for cleanliness. The ground is already spotless. No litter, no clutter. She's sweeping for clarity. You sit up and watch. She moves with the patience of someone who knows the earth remembers every footprint. Her strokes are wide and even, almost meditative. She doesn't look up. She doesn't expect acknowledgement. It's just what she does, and no one told her to do it. In Samoa, Taimi Masani, habitual time is different from routine. It's not rigid. It's not a schedule. It's a rhythm built into the body over years, like the way a song lives in your muscles after you've danced it enough times. You join her. She hands you another broom without a word. You begin to sweep beside her clumsily at first, then slower. Less like cleaning, more like brushing a memory out of the soil. The wind picks up just enough to scatter a few dry leaves, which she allows to settle again. No need to fight nature, only to listen. Later that morning, you find yourself sitting with a group of children under a large breadfruit tree. One of them is humming tunelessly while another weaves small fish out of green coconut leaves. The others watch. Why fish, you ask? One of them shrugs. It keeps our hands busy while we wait. Wait for what? For anything. A pause. Or nothing. And then they laugh, not at you, just at the fact that your question had a beginning, middle, and end. Their world doesn't work like that. Their world is shaped more like a circle than a line. You remember someone saying that before, one of the elders probably. Westerners see time like a road. We see it like the tide, always returning, and that tide shows up in everything, in how they speak, in how they move, in how they think. You spend the afternoon lying under that breadfruit tree watching shadows stretch and curl as the sun tiptoes across the sky. At one point, you hear someone preparing taro. The thump of pestle in wooden bowl. The scrape of fingers against the inner edge. Not hurried, not loud, just present, and the smell, earthy, starchy, warm. Dinner. Eventually, people begin to gather near the fire. The mats are unrolled, not in any particular order. A small pot is placed in the coals. Children pass around strips of grilled banana. And again, no one calls anyone. No clapping, no announcements. They simply arrive. As if the food called them in a voice only their stomachs could hear. Tonight, a new storyteller speaks. He's younger, maybe late 30s, and he has the subtle swagger of someone who doesn't mind being watched. But even he pauses before beginning. He waits for the fire to crackle a bit louder, for the night to lean in, and then he starts. He tells the tale of the lazy twin. Not lazy in the way you know it, not a couch-bound teenager with unwashed hair and a blank stare. No, this twin was called lazy because he never rushed, never hunted, never fetched. He would lie by the river all day, staring into the sky, and everyone thought him foolish. But one day, a storm came, a wild one. Lightning, trees snapping, waves eating canoes. The village panicked. But the lazy twin? He simply rolled over in his sleeping mat and waited. And when the storm passed, everyone's homes were washed away, except his. Why? Because he had built his hut above the flood line. Quietly, slowly, alone. And no one noticed because no one had ever asked him why he was lying by the river every day. He'd been studying the patterns of the tide. Not lazy, just unseen. The storyteller stops there. No resolution. No aha, because in this place, stories don't end. They settle. You sit in silence with the others, staring into the fire, letting the story stretch its legs in your mind. You think about the twin, about the river, about how much in your own life you've missed by assuming someone wasn't doing anything, when maybe they were doing everything differently. One of the elders clears his throat. He murmurs something to the storyteller, who nods. You catch just enough Samoan to understand. The story was a test, and you passed. Apparently, by not asking what the lesson was, you proved you were ready to hear it. That's when they begin the clapping. It's soft, slow, palms gently tapping in rhythm like a heartbeat rising from the ground. It's called Aluma, a kind of spiritual applause. Not for performance, for presence. And tonight, for the first time, you're part of it. You feel the vibration in your chest. You feel the warmth of the fire. You feel the night folding itself around you like a woven mat. And you realize something strange. You didn't earn this place. You just arrived. And that was enough. Later, when the fire burns low and people start drifting towards sleep, you lie awake a little longer, staring at the stars again. But this time, you don't count them. You just let them be. Each one, a reminder that stillness is not absence. It's abundance. And tomorrow, if all goes well, you'll do even less. You open your eyes to a different kind of quiet. Not the soft hush of dawn. Not the lull of afternoon heat. This is the quiet, ripe, weighty, humid. A rainstorm has just passed. You didn't hear it, but you can feel it in the way the world exhales. Everything is damp. Leaves shimmer. Raindrops balance on spiderwebs like beads of glass. Even the chickens seem to be moving slower than usual, their feathers fluffed and proud like they've survived something. You stretch your arms overhead and something in your shoulders cracks in a way that feels good. Useful. Earned. Someone hands you a slice of warm cassava cake wrapped in banana leaf. You don't know who. You don't ask. You nod your thanks, unwrap it carefully, and take a bite. Still warm. Still perfectly bland in that comforting, sleepy way. Today feels different. Not rushed. Not busy. Just purposeful. You can sense it in the way people are gathering, fewer smiles, more stillness. They're preparing for something. You ask quietly and someone whispers back, a funeral. No alarm. No panic. No dramatic sobbing. Just movement. Everyone knows their role. You follow the flow of bodies toward a clearing just outside the village where tall grasses have been pressed flat, creating a natural square beneath a towering fig tree. Mats are laid out in perfect lines. Flowers are being gathered, tiale and mozooi, their scents thick in the warm air. A woven mat is unfurled gently onto the earth. On it, an old man lies wrapped in layers of tapa cloth. His face is calm, almost amused, as though the last thing he heard before leaving this world was a joke he didn't quite finish laughing at. You don't know him, but everyone else did. You sit near the back, not out of disrespect, but to observe, to feel. To absorb like the earth has absorbed the rain. And then, in the gentlest voice you've ever heard, someone begins to speak. No pulpit. No microphone. Just a voice rising from the middle of the crowd like a bird call at dusk. He talks about the man. About his silence. His stillness. About how he was never the fastest worker, but always the one people listened to when no one else knew what to say. He waited, the speaker says, and because of that, we learned to wait too. No praise. No exaggeration. Just truth spoken slowly with pauses long enough for the trees to breathe between words. You learned that the man was once a fisherman who gave up fishing, not because he tired of it, but because he wanted to watch the tides instead. He became the tide student, they say. And for years, he would sit by the shore just watching, measuring, listening, then quietly advising the younger fishermen, now is a good time. He never boasted. He never led, but no one ever fished without asking him first. There's a phrase someone whispers nearby. Ue malu lutino, e melosi luminatua. The body rests, but the memory is strong. You feel it settle in your chest like warm rain. Not sadness. Not joy. Something else. Something soft and wide. After the speaking, the people begin to hum. Not a song, not really, just layers of voices rising and folding like smoke. No words. Just sound. And in that moment, you understand what a Samoan funeral really is. It's not a goodbye. It's a transfer. The person is not leaving. They're becoming part of everything else. The ocean, the wind. The wind, the waiting. You watch as the body is slowly lifted and placed into the ground, not with ceremony, but with care. No rush. No shouting. Just steady, communal hands. Flowers are added. Earth is returned. The mat is rolled. The voices fade. No one says, let's go. They just drift away, one by one, leaving space for the silence to settle back into the clearing. You remain, not because you have to, because it feels wrong to leave too quickly. As if the spot still holds his breath. And then, without meaning to, you lie down beside the grave. The earth is still warm, damp, alive. You stare up at the fig tree above you. Its leaves shimmer in the post-rain light, droplets falling gently to the ground like tiny farewells. A bird lands on one of the branches, shakes itself dry, then sings exactly one note, and then it's quiet again. Later, when you return to the village, someone places a woven necklace over your head. You don't ask why. They don't explain. But you feel it. This is not a decoration. It's a message. You are part of this now. That night, the fail is quieter than usual. No stories are told. No songs sung. Just the crackle of firewood, the soft breathing of sleepers, and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. You lie awake, eyes tracing the familiar constellations. And you think of the old man, his face, his stillness, his refusal to rush. You wonder how long he sat watching the tide before someone finally asked for his wisdom. And you promise yourself that tomorrow you'll sit by the water. Just sit. No questions, no goals, just presence. Because now you understand. Stillness is not what happens when nothing is left. Stillness is what you make room for after the noise, after the effort, after the long, long rain. You begin the day in the sea, not for a swim, not for bathing. You simply walk in ankle-deep at first, then to your knees until the water curls lazily around your waist. It's warm but not stifling. Just alive. Like it's trying to tell you something without using words. You stay there a long time, feet shifting gently in the sand, eyes fixed on the horizon. Behind you, the village breathes its slow rhythm. Children's voices drift over the waves, punctuated by the occasional splash of someone dropping a cooking pot too loudly. Life hums but never yells, and you've stopped measuring the day in hours. There's no clock in your head anymore. Just mood, just light, just whether the breeze feels like a whisper or a question. Eventually, you wander back to shore. A group is gathered around a young woman. She's crouched on the ground, etching something into a piece of flattened bark with a sharpened bone. The others watch quietly. You move closer. She's making siapo, a traditional Samoan cloth created from the bark of the mulberry tree, painted with natural dyes. The designs are geometric, hypnotic, and deeply symbolic. She doesn't glance up. Her hand moves slowly like she's writing a letter to the earth. What does it say, you ask? A man beside you replies, it doesn't say. It remembers. That's when it clicks. This isn't art, it's memory storage. Before books. Before written language. Before time had a face, this was how knowledge survived. Each swirl, each line, each triangle is a story. A lineage. A whisper passed down from the ancestors that tells you who you are and where your feet should go next. Some patterns represent winds. Others, tides. Some mark important decisions or ceremonies or losses. And some are just there to remind you belong. One fringe theory you remember from your pre-trip research said that the patterns on Siapo may have once served as early maps. Topographical records woven into cloth, worn on the body, passed through generations. Historians still argue about it, of course. That's what historians do. But when you look at this cloth now, you don't see debate. You see direction. Without arrows. Without signs. Just presence baked into dye. You're invited to try. You kneel beside the young woman and accept the sharpened bone. She offers you a slice of bark. You hesitate. You're not an artist. You're not even sure what shape your hand wants to make. Think of where you are, she says gently. Not what you want. So you let your hand move. The pattern comes slowly, awkwardly at first, then smoother. You trace a circle, a line, another, not quite beautiful, but real. When you're done, she nods. No critique, no praise, just acknowledgement. It goes into the cloth with the others. Later, you find yourself under a mango tree again, sharing the shade with a small group of elders. They're passing around a bowl of kava, earthy, bitter, grounding. You sip. It numbs your lips almost immediately, softens your limbs like warm sand. One of the elders speaks, slowly, through the haze of calm. You're learning to walk in circles. It's not a question. It's not a metaphor. You smile faintly. I think so, he chuckles. Then you'll never be lost. You think about that. About how much of your old life was spent fearing aimlessness. Needing GPS, needing timelines, needing something next. Here, there is no next. Just more of now. In the late afternoon, you help prepare the evening meal. Nothing fancy. Taro. Roasted bananas. A bit of fish wrapped in leaves. The fire is already burning. The stones are already hot. No one rushes. Everyone helps. But there's no assigned roles. You simply watch and step in when needed. This, someone says, is how they teach children to cook. By not teaching. By simply letting them stand nearby, watch, imitate, try, fail, try again. No recipes, just repetition. You accidentally burn the first banana you wrap. It splits open and hisses into the fire. You brace for laughter, for correction. But all you get is a shrug and a new banana. No fire, no learning, someone says. That night, the food is shared around the fire. You eat with your hands, sticky with ash and oil and salt. You don't care. You don't even notice. The sky darkens slowly above, and a soft drumbeat begins near the edge of the trees. Someone has brought out a pate, a slit drum made from hollowed wood. The beat is low, patient. A woman begins to sway beside it. Her hands rise and fall like sea foam. Not a dance, not quite. A gesture. A language of arms and hips and eyes. You watch, transfixed, as others begin to join her. Not performing, not rehearsed. Just responding. The rhythm builds, then fades. Builds again, then falls silent. There's no finish, no crescendo, just a natural return to stillness. The fire crackles. Someone hums, and you feel a pressure inside your chest that you haven't felt in a long time. It's not anxiety, it's fullness. Not of thoughts, of space. You walk down to the beach one last time before bed. The tide is low. The stars thick and bold above you, reflected in the wet sand like a second sky. You dig your toes into the shore. You close your eyes, and for the first time in your life, you don't just accept stillness. You crave it. The morning feels heavy with meaning before anything even happens. You rise slowly, not because you're tired, but because there's no rush to move. The air is dense but not unpleasant, like the island is still steeping in itself, letting the flavor of yesterday linger before committing to today. You wander toward the village center. Something's different. People are gathering again, but this time in finer mats, with hair freshly oiled and braided, children dressed in carefully folded, i.e. lava wraps. No one explains, but you understand, this is not a festival. It's something quieter. Something sacred. You ask someone what's going on. They smile and simply say, we're remembering. You follow, of course. A long line forms, moving toward a raised platform shaded by palm leaves. On the platform sits a wooden chest, simple, hand-carved, flanked by two elders. The air is so still you can hear sandals brushing against stone. People approach the chest one by one. Each carries something: a shell, a piece of dyed cloth, a bone pendant, a polished rock. Offerings, not to gods, to memory. You sit at the edge of the gathering, watching. Nobody takes anything from the chest. They only add. The woman next to you leans in and whispers, "This is our Phalatalanoa, the cloth of stories. Every object here holds a memory." You glance at the chest again. It isn't full, not even close, but the space inside it feels crowded somehow. Alive. The next person steps forward. A young man places an old sandal inside. Worn leather. Split sole. He says nothing, just bows and steps back. Someone else leaves a necklace made of dried mango seeds. Another, a piece of coral wrapped in fishing line. None of these objects would mean anything to a stranger. But here, they're chapters in a book with no title, no author, and no end. You're invited to contribute. You hesitate. You don't have anything. Not really. No token. No story. Nothing that feels worthy. But then you remember the shell you picked up 3 days ago. The one you almost threw away because it didn't look special. You dig it from your pocket, still scratched, still chipped. You walk forward. When you reach the chest, something odd happens. You hear nothing. No wind. No coughs. No birds. Just quiet. As if the entire island paused its breath. You place the shell inside. It doesn't shine. It doesn't gleam, but it belongs now. As you return to your place, the elder on the platform nods once, eyes closed. Later that day, as the sun climbs and the light thickens, you find yourself walking inland, guided by a teenage boy named Tima who gestures for you to follow without much explanation. You pass into the rainforest. It's cooler under the canopy, the ground soft and padded with generations of fallen leaves. Tima doesn't speak. He just walks. Sometimes he hums. Sometimes he stops to touch a tree or flick a beetle off a vine. The path narrows, widens, then narrows again. Eventually, you reach a flat clearing marked by stones. An old malai, a ceremonial space used only on rare occasions. Tima gestures for you to sit. Then he places something in the dirt in front of you. A coconut, split in half. One side full of water. The other, empty. He says, "This is the teaching." Then he sits down beside you and says nothing else. You stare at the halves. You wait, and slowly the meaning unfolds. The full half is your mind. Brimming, busy, sloshing with thoughts and plans and what-ifs. The empty half? That's what you need to become. Not hollow, open. So you sit, and sit some more. No talking, no movement, and without noticing exactly when, your shoulders loosen. Your breathing deepens. Your thoughts slow, not because you told them to, but because they finally could. You're empty now, not lost, ready. When you return to the village at sunset, a quiet sense of celebration is growing. Mats are being arranged into larger circles. Coconuts are being cracked. Smoke curls upward from 3 cooking fires. But no one shouts, no one hurries. Even celebration here takes its time. A drumbeat begins, low and patient, like a heart waiting for sleep. And the dance starts, not one performer but many. No stage. Just rhythm. Children leap and sway, mimicking fish and birds and wind. Elders clap softly in time. The teenage girls move with deliberate grace, their hands painting invisible stories across the sky. You're pulled in, not physically, spiritually, because watching this dance is like watching truth. Not the kind printed in books or shouted from pulpits, but the kind lived in bodies, remembered in breath. At some point, you realize your foot is tapping. Your fingers are tracing shapes in the air. You don't even mean to. Someone hands you a lei of frangipani flowers. You don't know from whom. You don't need to. You wear it. You sway. You belong. The night closes gently like eyelids, and you too begin to drift not away but deeper into something. Not a destination. Condition. Of quiet. Of presence. Of becoming a part of this story. Even if no one ever says your name. You wake to the sound of water boiling. Not a kettle, not the shrill whistle of pressure, but a gentle bubbling, steady and calm. Somewhere nearby, someone is steeping leaves in a clay pot over a quiet flame. The steam rises in lazy spirals, curling into the cool morning air. You sit up, stretch, and inhale the scent. Earthy, bitter, sweet. You don't know the name of the leaf. You don't ask. You simply accept the wooden cup that's handed to you and sip. It tastes like yesterday and something older. A man sits beside you, nods once, and says, "That plant is used when the body forgets how to rest." You glance at him. He's not joking. He says it like a diagnosis and a cure. Later that morning, you follow him into the hills, higher than you've been before. The path winds through thickets of green and red hibiscus, sharp with insects, soft with birdsong. You pass old lava stones half sunken into the earth like forgotten footprints. He walks without speaking, but you don't need explanation. Everything is its own kind of sentence here. At the summit, the sea unfolds in every direction. You can see the village far below, tiny rooftops like scattered leaves. Beyond that, the endless shimmer of water, and farther still, just a faint, jagged outline against the clouds. Another island. Tutuila, the man says. You blink. You've heard the name. Another part of Samoa. Close, but not here. He squints at the horizon. They say the waves between us are old cousins. Always bickering. You smile. The sea does seem rowdier between the islands, wind swirling with some ancestral mischief. Then he turns to you and says something unexpected. Do you want to learn how to be invisible? You think it's a joke, but his face is calm. You watch long enough, he says, and the world stops watching back. He crouches low, places both hands flat against a rock. Try it. You do. At first, nothing happens. Then, as you breathe deeper, the island's volume begins to dim. Not go silent. Just soften. You feel the wind shift against your back, then around you. You hear the birds differently, less as background noise, more as conversation. The sun warms your neck, but not sharply. It rests there like a patient hand, and slowly, for just a moment, you disappear. Not in the magical sense. Not with smoke or vanishing, but you stop needing to be seen, and it is delicious. The man smiles. That's Matagi Viaya, the watched wind. When you learn to ride beneath it, you disturb nothing. Historians still argue whether this was part of ancient warfare or spiritual training or just an inherited gift of people who lived between sky and sea. Some say the chiefs of old would walk from one end of a village to the other without being noticed by choice, but the truth is quieter. The truth is, invisibility is not a trick. It's a relationship. You walk back together, barely speaking. Takes longer. You let it. When you return to the village, you find an old woman crushing something with a stone pestle. You sit beside her. She doesn't look up. Do you want to help? She asks. You nod, but she doesn't hand you the pestle. Instead, she places a woven basket in your lap. Sort these leaves. No good ones. Only broken ones. You look at the pile. They all look fine. She sees your confusion and says, only the damaged ones carry flavor. The perfect ones are just leaves. You begin sorting. Slowly, and sure enough, the torn leaves smell sharper, brighter, alive. Another lesson, another whispered truth hiding in the daily work of nothing. As evening comes, a gentle hush falls over the village. Someone has begun singing again. No words, just vowel sounds that rise and fall like tide. You find yourself beneath the fig tree from before, its roots thick and gnarled like sleeping serpents. The children are gathered nearby, lying on their backs, pointing at clouds that no longer exist. Just the idea of clouds. You lie beside them. One child turns to you and asks, what shape do you want to be when you sleep? You blink. What do you mean? They shrug. Do you want to be a boat? A tree? A whale? You consider this. And then you say, maybe, a rock. They nod, satisfied. That's a good one. Rocks don't dream, but the dreams sit on them. You laugh gently, not because it's silly, because it's true. As the firelight begins to bloom and flickers across the huts and cooking stones, you feel the edges of sleep arriving, not as a thief, but as a guest. You return to your mat. Someone has left a folded cloth beside your pillow, dyed in patterns you recognize now. A wave, a star, a set of footprints. It's your day told in silence. You lie down, and in the space before dreaming, just as your mind begins to fade into the dark, you hear a whisper in your own voice. Tomorrow, do even less. And then, like a stone beneath the dreaming sea, you disappear. The rain arrives before the light. Not loud, not sudden. Just the steady, velvet hush of water meeting leaf. It taps on the thatched roof above you like 1,000 tiny drummers in no particular hurry. The sound is round, patient, and for a long moment you don't move. You just listen. You're not cold. The rain here is warm. Even the storms remember to be kind. You rise slowly and wrap the blanket tighter around your shoulders. Outside, the village seems blurred, smudged gently by the water's caress. Children chase each other barefoot through puddles. Smoke curls from one cooking fire, refusing to rise, choosing instead to drift sideways and wrap around the walls of the nearest vale. You sit at the threshold, between inside and out, cup of herbal tea balanced on your knee. It's a root you don't know. It tastes like dirt and honey. Someone nearby says, today is for staying still. You nod. No one plans to go fishing. No work is done. There's no ceremony. No meeting. Just rain. And everyone lets it be. Later, someone begins telling a story. Not from a book. Not from memory. It's a story that builds itself as it goes. like a wave gathering over time. The storyteller, an older woman wrapped in a faded red lava, sits in the center of the dry vale with children circling her like satellites. You sit too quietly, just close enough to catch the words. She tells of a boy who talked too much, not because he was foolish, but because he feared silence. He thought that if things got quiet, people would forget he was there. So he filled every breath with noise. But one day, while trying to explain a storm he didn't understand, he lost his voice. Just gone, plucked from him by the wind. So he had no choice but to listen. And for the first time, he heard things. Birds announcing rain, crabs shifting under sand, roots drinking water. He heard his mother breathing while she slept. He heard the world. And when his voice finally came back, he didn't speak for a week. He just smiled, because he no longer needed to prove his place in the story. He'd found it in the silence. The children nod solemnly. You nod too, because you know exactly how that feels.